Well, hey, hello, hi everybody. How are you doing today? I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Hey Drew, how you doing, bud? We're streaming away, we're streaming today. I hope you're doing fine. There's so many streams for us to see, but this one here is mine. I hope that you're happy, I hope that you're well. Now come on and join me, watch the world go to hell as we are streaming away. We're streaming today, let's stream today. Dark times indeed, Drew. Dark times indeed. I'm going to be getting into what's going on in the Canada federal election here in just a moment. Justin, how are you doing? If that's the way you roll, bud, I'm not going to stop you. What's going on in the federal election? I found some interesting analysis and some interesting stuff that really breaks down what the demographics are and who's voting for who and all of that kind of stuff. But before we do that, as we do every day here, we get David Lynch's weather report. So, take it away, Mr. Lynch.
Good morning. It's August 30, 2021, and it's a Monday. Here in LA, a cloudy morning.
Lucky man.
Very still right now. 64 degrees Fahrenheit, around 18 Celsius.
Oh, that's perfect weather.
Today I was thinking about the year 1964 and the Beatles song, If I Fell. This afternoon it'll be going up to 82 degrees Fahrenheit, around 28 Celsius, and these clouds should burn away by mid-morning, 9 or 10 this morning, and after that we should be enjoying those beautiful blue skies and golden sunshine all along the way. Everyone, have a great day.
You too, David. Thank you so much. Now, usually what I like to do is play a song, but of course he picked Beatles, so I couldn't get my act together enough. So we're just going to move into today's number. So Justin and Drew, if you want to participate in this, and anybody who's listening, if you want to participate, pick a number between 1 and 10. This is David Lynch's daily draw.
Here we go for today's number. It's August 30.
I'm going to go with 3.
2021.
I'm feeling a 3 today. Feeling kind of on the lower end of the spectrum.
Each ball has a number.
Nice solid 3.
Numbers 1
Am I the only
10.
one? We got a 1 from Drew. I hope you're number 1, Drew.
Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. My absolute favorite part.
Pick a number.
Here we go. Here we go.
Today's number is
10.
10.
You were just on the wrong side of it, Drew. You were just on the wrong side of it. You should have gone the other direction. Of course, what will tomorrow's number be? Yeah, Drew, but what we found out, Drew, is that today's a day of extremes, right? And maybe, like, the opposite of what you think. So whatever you think, maybe take the opposite perspective. Huh? Maybe that's what's going to happen. Who knows? Who knows? All right, that's a good spot of fun, a good place to put us. Because boy, howdy, guys, what a struggle day. As you can see, my video for the day, Canada's sharp turn towards fascism. People have been criticizing that position of mine because I think that they are largely, I don't mean to be rude when I say this, but it is exactly what I feel. I think people are being largely illiterate about this subject, which, I mean, that's to be expected. But when you start, accurately critiquing these conservatives who now have seized the lead, that if an election was held today, you'd have a conservative minority, right? A libertarian. Now, hopefully we'll cure you of that, Justin. Hopefully we'll cure you of that. I mean, are you an American libertarian or a European libertarian? Because those are different. So we have on the far right of the spectrum, I mean, O'Toole's pitch to the white supremacists in his party has been well documented at this point. The guy is walking around saying Canada first. The guy is walking around releasing tweets that not only mimic, but also follow Nazi slogans and Nazi tweets, or Nazi tweets, but Nazi slogans. Their 1488 formula. Heavy sarcasm. Oh, yes, okay. And, but also the party is taking out ads in a cult, in a paper that is owned by a cult that is a racial purity cult. Like, I just no longer know what people need to see. Like, do they literally need to see Aaron O'Toole walking around with a swastika, like, on his forehead or something? Is that literally what needs to happen? Hey, Misty, how you doing? Good to see you. I'm just glad you're here, Misty. And so when you start talking about the fact that the Conservative Party has been taken over by a white supremacist movement, that the Canada First movement is well organized with the intention of taking over the Conservative Party, and it looks like they're largely being successful, no one takes you seriously. So it's another form of denialism, just like the climate change denial, just like the failure of capitalism, that level of denial, that Jesus forgives, all of that kind of stuff. There's just the heavy, heavy denialism that's coming from the far right. And moreover, it's looking as though the people who are voting conservative are happy with the suffering that's going to be spread by the conservatives. That the conservatives are going to commit austerity, and the people who are voting for them are saying, like, yeah, those people deserve it. They deserve the suffering that's going to be inflicted, even though it's going to cost extra, even though it's going to cost more. Those people deserve it, so we say that that's how it's going to be. It looks to me like the Liberals are giving up. What I'm seeing is essentially capitulation, that any political party with even a tiny little brain in their head that was actually interested in maintaining power would at least offer something, right? But they're not offering anything. The Liberals are not coming out with anything. And, and what it looks like to me is it looks like, here's the narrative that I think I'm starting to see. Because you got to remember that the Liberals and the Conservatives are allies. They work together, and that to maintain the system of neoliberal capitalism, this failed religious ideology that doesn't actually work, the only solution for the neoliberals is to commit austerity against the public. That during the pandemic, they were willing to commit to socialism. They were willing to actually help the populace, because the alternative would have been the United States, and we know what that looks like. That the horror and the despair that's coming out of the United States is far more costly and far more difficult to deal with than simply, using socialist ideas and actually helping the populace with things like the CERB, with things like this. But now the Liberals are fairly aware that, well, okay, if we continue acting in this way and we continue going towards socialism, it's going to mean that our owners are not going to be happy with us, and that our owners are going to steadily abandon us, and that our owners are going to steadily no longer work with us. So we have to commit to austerity, and the Liberals know this. That's why they were cutting the CRB. That's why they were doing all this kind of stuff. But they don't want to, right? They don't necessarily want to, because, like, what is a liberal but a conservative with a conscience? But the conscience is not strong enough to overwhelm the fascist organizations that exist within the capitalist structures. And so it looks to me like the liberals are doing what liberals do, which is they're taking the knee. They're going to capitulate power to the conservatives, just like liberals always do, and they're just going to let their allies, the conservatives, commit to the plan of austerity to make them look like the bad guys, so that when the populace revolts against the austerity that is being committed by both the liberals and the conservatives, the allies, well, then the populace will bounce off the conservatives and go back to liberalism, right? And the ball keeps getting passed forth, back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth, over and over and over and over again, because the populace is largely gullible. Doesn't understand that this is an alliance, that these two organizations work together in tandem, that they plan, that they organize, right? That any disagreements that exist between these two organizations are very superficial. But when it comes to actual structural issues and the structural issues of capital, they work together. And that's what you're going to see. If you see a conservative minority come in, people are saying already, like, oh, conservative minority, well, that means they'll work with the NDP or maybe the Bloc or any of that kind of stuff. That's not going to happen. The conservatives are going to work with the liberals because they're allies, right? That's what's going to happen. That the conservatives are going to want to put in a policy of austerity, that the conservatives are the ones that are going to want to do all this kind of stuff, and the liberals are going to go, okay, and they're going to go along with it. Because the liberals don't care, right? The conservatives are their allies. And and I actually genuinely do believe that Justin Trudeau wants out. I think that Justin Trudeau is done. I think that he had his time as prime minister. He realized that it's actually a job and that it's actually difficult to do, to be the leader of a country, right? He realized that he knows that his legacy is a failure, right? Like, he has a worse legacy than Stephen Harper. Like, Stephen Harper's legacy is going to be more long-lasting and permanently, structurally tied to the fate of Canada than Justin Trudeau's. Like, what's Justin Trudeau's legacy? Like, honestly, can someone put in the chat? Can someone respond? What's Justin Trudeau's legacy? And in my view, this is what Canadians are revolting against. This is what Canadians are kind of spitting at Trudeau for. Because they're like, what's Trudeau's legacy? Sure, he put in the CERB, but then he immediately set out to dismantle it. Like, what's his legacy? And if he's not willing to stand up and actually fight for his legacy, yeah, weed, that's actually a fine response, the legalizing of weed, of marijuana, even though it was kind of done in this half-assed sort of way. Didn't pardon anybody, right? That kind of thing. But, like, the Harper government put in the child care benefit, reduced child poverty in this country by 50%, right? When Stephen Harper came into power, we had one trade deal with America, which Harper said was collapsing, that we need to disconnect our wagon from their star. And so when he left office, we had 50 trade deals with 50 different nations, right? Like, that's significant. Like, that's a legacy, right? You want to talk about legacies? That's a legacy. And that isn't to say that Harper was like the greatest prime minister ever. He had many failings as a prime minister and as a leader, which makes sense given his white supremacy and his fundamentalist Christian background, right? And so there's an article that I found here. So first of all, it's good to point out, Aaron O'Toole has hired the UK consultants who helped Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers win. This is a significant threat. This is a significant threat. People are talking as though this minority is just going to be a minority and that's it. We still have a bit of time before this election. We've still got over 2 weeks, right? That's plenty of time for these guys. It's plenty of time for these effective grifters and effective liars to grift a gullible and compliant populace to change this minority into a majority. And we as leftists need to be prepared for it. We need to be prepared for it, and we need to be honest about it. We need to be honest that it is possible that we will get a majority government. in a funny kind of way, Misty, I know that you're in a situation where this news might really matter to you. The only party that's actually running a platform saying that they're going to double disability services in Canada are the Conservatives. And so it's extremely possible that the Conservatives, should they get in, are going to hold up an increase in spending in disability services as a shield, so that when they use their sword to lay waste to the populace, they'll be able to deflect criticisms away from themselves by increasing support for the disabled. So they'll abandon the populace through heavy austerity while holding up this shield, which they need. It's the number one thing that the Conservatives need right now, is they need to show that they're capable of compassion. And so faking it is good enough, right? Just, we don't need to actually have compassion. We just need to appear as though we have compassion. And one way of doing that is picking a disenfranchised group and helping them while destroying everyone else. And so it looks as though it's going to be the disabled. So this is a significant threat. A majority Conservative government is possible. Not only is it possible, now that this is on board, I actually think that it's the most likely outcome. And we have to be prepared for it. We have to accept it. We have to just remind ourselves that Canadians are not very politically astute. There is a lot of denial, especially regarding the Conservatives. There's a lot of denialism that happens because people don't want to believe that any Canadian is possible of being a Nazi, right? They don't want to believe that any Canadian is possible, that it's possible for them to be white supremacist, let alone a heavily organized and politically motivated group like Canada First, right? So this is something that we need to expect and anticipate, or else when it happens, we're going to be obliterated. Like we're going to spend 6 months just recovering, right? I would prefer that we spend those first 6 months organizing instead of recovering. And so we need to be very upfront about it. We need to be aware that not only is it possible that the Conservatives are going to get their majority, it's likely. Because what I've seen over this last week has convinced me beyond the shadow of a doubt. Like, Canadians are either completely fine with white supremacy in their country, or they're just completely unaware of it. So they're either complicit or in denial. And that's very dangerous. And the truth is that the media is not reporting on it. Like everything that I talk about in regards to Aaron O'Toole, the Toronto Star doesn't talk about it, Globe and Mail doesn't talk about it, National Post, Global News, CTV, CBC, nobody talks about it. So the media is covering for the Conservatives. They're covering for these white supremacist groups that we know are actively working in the Conservative Party, that we know are actively working in the Conservative Party. And like, why is it that, all these news organizations are a blackface scandal? That's completely fine. But if you give money to a newspaper, public funds no less, to a newspaper that is owned by a literal racial purity cult, that's fine. No need to report on that. No controversy there, right? No controversy there. If Aaron O'Toole is walking around saying white supremacist slogans, no controversy there. Don't need to even have an opinion article on it. Not even an opinion article. The failure of our media to protect us from white supremacy and to protect us from fascists and Nazis has been astounding. It is astounding to watch our media abandon us in this regard and refuse to actually stand up and say, if you want to vote conservative, but at least know who you're voting for, right? And all they're doing is they're covering. They're just covering for these conservatives because the conservatives are the ones that largely own the media apparatus, right? And these conservatives are fine with the white supremacists in their party. As long as they vote conservative, they don't care, right? They don't care. So this is the situation that we find ourselves in here in Canada. And I mean, and it must be pointed out, like, there's one of the federal parties is literally offering stuff. Not only offering stuff, but offering things, hey, Crouching, how you doing, bud? Not only offering stuff, but offering stuff that is extremely popular. Raising taxes on the wealthy, 92% support within the populace. Don't commit austerity against the populace, 92%, right? And who's the party that's actually talking that way and who's actually offering that things? Oh, the party run by the brown guy with the big beard and the turban, right? And so what I'm seeing now is I'm seeing a candidate that's picking up the phone and saying, Jagmeet Singh? Oh, yeah, I really like Jagmeet Singh. Yeah, oh, yeah, I like him. Yeah, he seems really great. Yeah. Click. I will never vote for a brown man. That is what is happening. That the populace is on the phone, being all nicey nice about it, hanging up, and then saying to each other, no, I'm not voting for that brown guy. That's not what's happening. Right? So, because what else could it possibly be? Like, explain this to me. What else could it possibly be? That, hey, Bumbleguppy, good to see you. Because, like, if Jagmeet Singh was a white man, named, like, Patrick Stevenson or something, right? People would be like, wow, he wants to raise taxes on the wealthy, just like 92% of us want. Oh, wow, he wants to do this, he wants to do that, he wants to do this, right? If Jagmeet Singh was like named, Jason Singer, he was just like a white dude, I think people would be voting for him. I think people would be going towards him in droves. I think it would be at least competitive. But Jagmeet Singh's numbers haven't moved an inch. They haven't gone up at all. Like, you can see it. It's very black and white. Like, error. Okay, I can't show it to you. But I mean, like, if anything, his numbers have declined over aggregate, right? He used to have 20%. Now he's got 19.5, right? Like, and why? I genuinely want someone to explain it to me. He's the only one actually offering anything. He's the only one actually giving policies. And if he looked like Jack Layton, people would be going crazy for him. They'd be gobsmacked for him. But he doesn't look like Jack Layton. And I think that that's the problem, and I think that we can clearly state that that's the problem. And then if we get into, here is a great article that comes out of The Writ, How Aaron O'Toole is Carving a Path to Government. Now, even this is being a bit sunny ways about it and thinking like, yeah, it's possible he gets his majority, but minority most likely. I disagree. So what we have is older, less educated Canadians going conservative. So once again, we're being abandoned by the baby boomers, right? Once again, the baby boomers coming in to betray us, as they do. And what we're seeing here is, so on the national level, the Liberals are down 2, the Cons are up 3. This is nationally, right? Men, of course, are swinging in larger numbers, right? Women are leaving both the NDP and the Liberals to go conservative. Someone could explain that one to me. I don't understand this shift from NDP to conservative. That doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. But the big block, right, 50 to 64, huge numbers of Liberals leaving, and they are mainly going either to conservative or to the PPC, right? You can see it pretty cleanly. Or they're leaving from the NDP and the Green and going, like, to the Bloc Québécois, which I think is unlikely. But you're seeing a pretty heavy drop in Liberal support amongst the boomers, right? 50 to 64. I guess that's more Gen X at this point. And then, of course, when you look, if you have an education of high school or less, this is where the most dramatic shift has actually happened. Little bit of drop of support from the Liberals, but look at the Green Party drop and the PPC drop in support, actually, right? And then big gains in the NDP here, but also big gains in the Conservatives. So it looks like the thing that's been very odd to me is that as the Liberals have been dropping in support, it hasn't been a branch. right? It hasn't been that some go conservative, some go NDP. That's what I expected to see, but it genuinely looks like the people who are abandoning ship from the Lib conservative. Like, here's a great example, 65 plus, if you're over the age of 65, it's all conservative. You've gone from liberals to from Bloc, from PPC, from Green. Just shoot. So, once again, the boomers doing all they can to betray us, doing everything they can. Yeah, lots of people vote on looks. Same thing happens in courts. Yeah. So, and of course, like 18 to 34, right? No. And then you see an interesting thing happen, 35 to 49, right? Well, so you've got your daddies and your sons. I saw this happen the last time when Harper got in, right? Saw a lot of sons talking how they were going to vote with their dads, right? That their dads were voting conservative, and so they'll vote conservative too. And they're just like 18-year-old kids. They don't know anything. Yeah, Vince, that's the truth. Pallister resigned. It's very likely that Wab Kinew is going to become the premier of Manitoba, which is actually extremely well-timed for Manitoba, because the worst possible thing that could happen to a province at this point is having a conservative prime minister at the same time that we have a conservative premier. Like, what's going to happen here in Ontario between Doug Ford and Aaron O'Toole is going to be outright robbery. Like, it's going to be very, very brutal. It's going to be very brutal to see. People are, like, I'm talking about mass evictions. Like, people are going to be completely abandoned because these guys are just neoliberal psychopaths. They don't know anything except give money to rich people. And those rich people are just going to hoard it for themselves, as they always have. And so, and who is the engine that's ensuring the abandonment of the populace? It's the boomers, as always, right? As always. The boomers and their sons. And there is no, and the only people who seem to be going towards, funnily enough, the NDP, well, it's people who only have a high school education. Yeah, the get a job fever will be high. Exactly. I think that part of what it is that we put in these supports, these absolutely crucial and necessary supports. We put in these absolutely crucial and necessary supports that should become permanent, right? It's cheaper to run a society this way, to put in supports and ensure that everybody has food and shelter taken care of, right? We put in those supports, and now there's the backlash that the boomer generation, which sees helping people as an aggregate negative, right? Unless there's some like little African kid that they can donate $10 to a month or something, then they get to pat themselves on the back and pretend like they're a good Christian. But they can abandon their own children, and that's just fine. Just get a job, right? Just get a job, and forget about the fact that many, like, I have 2 jobs. I've got 2 jobs. And like how forget about the fact that the economy is collapsing. Forget about the fact that the job market is in massive decline and being assaulted regularly from the capitalist class. Forget about all that. You literally can just cross your eyes and just be like, just get a job. Just walk across the street, look the man in the eye and shake his hand and then go to work. I don't understand these kids these days. Yeah, we know you don't understand these kids these days, dude. We know. We're well aware that you don't understand these kids these days because you don't understand anything, right? That your life is completely disconnected from the life of what's going on today. It's just like, and I hate to say it, like, I know boomers who don't think this way, but are also completely willing to just absolutely kind of go along with it because it's like, what is it but abandonment? Like, what is it but abandonment? All the while clutching onto a Bible that they say give their money to the poor, right? This is the great thing, right? You've got these guys walking around saying that they're the defenders of Western civilization. They don't give a fuck about Western civilization at all. They don't give a fuck about Western civilization. If they gave a fuck about Western civilization, then that means that they would actually listen to what their Christ says. But they don't. They're not interested in their Christ. Right? They're not interested in their Christ. They're not interested in their Bible. And if they were, then they would be giving money to the poor. It's pretty straightforward. Pretty straightforward. And so the amount of fraud and absurdity that exists within this older generation, like, it really is to a point now where there's like a little kid walking around with a fork and wants to put that fork into the light switch. And we're saying, don't do that. Don't put this fork into the light switch. And the kid goes, well, why not? And we say, if you do that, it's going to electrocute you, right? And then the kid says, that's just commie talk, and jams the fork into the light switch. Like, they're not going to listen to us. They have to experience it firsthand. They have to see the consequences of what they're doing firsthand. And many of them, I have spoke to sympathetic boomers, and there are many sympathetic boomers that are saying, like, no, this generation just needs to die off. Like, it needs to die off. That some of these people, it doesn't matter what they see. They're always going to believe that it's that person's personal responsibility. They're always going to believe, it doesn't matter what happens. They're always going to believe that it's that person's personal responsibility. Hey, Duke, how you doing? Don't know if I've ever seen you in here, bud. Good to see you. Misty says, I'm looking for people who have a scrap of lawn that would be willing to rent it to me to stay in a tent in. Only way I can seem to afford anything. Yeah, that's what it is these days, Misty. That's what it is these days. I'm a boomer. I agree with everything you said. Yeah. It's ingrained in them so deeply, says Matthias. Good to see you, Matthias. The left, hey, Demand Better, how you doing? The left needs to coordinate during elections the narrow margins that Khan might win by, making vote splitting so much worse. Even when Canadians are offered good policy, they don't find out about it, so they vote against their own interests. Demand Better, I want to check you on one point, because the new info that I've been seeing, right? The question, this comes from the conversation, Canadian election 2021, do strategic voting campaigns actually work? Right? So you're talking about like getting into a strategic voting kind of position where we move things this way, move things that way. And the answer is no. That when we get into this position of what's called vote splitting, right? It doesn't actually work that way. That Canadians ultimately do vote their conscience or their gut. That Canadians do ultimately in some cases, strategic voting efforts have not only failed to block the election of Conservative candidates, but counterproductively facilitated their election by confusing voters and further splintering anti-Conservative votes. Right? That it doesn't actually work. So this narrative that comes out that says we need to vote strategically or any of that, people are very staunch in their positions, and moreover, most people are not voting rationally, right? Most Canadians do not vote rationally. They vote from their gut, really. Like they don't make it any farther than here. That the thought originates in their dick, right? Or in their genitals, because women, this is the same thing for women too. The energy comes up to the gut and it doesn't go any farther than that. It doesn't make it into the power center. It doesn't make it into the heart. It doesn't get articulated here. It's certainly not thought about, and they're absolutely not thinking about the higher divine connection to any of it, right? So it's like people vote from here, from their gut, and that's it. So this idea of strategic voting, to me, that sounds like somebody just overthinking the process. Right? The process is actually much, 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 much simpler than that. This because Canadian, like, the amount of thought that you're putting into it, the average Canadian just simply doesn't have the energy or time to. So they just end up voting from their gut. Duke's saying they don't see it as cruel. Boomers have told me they will basically burn the whole world down rather than let someone undeserving get a handout. Yeah, it's insane. Also, hi, yeah, I'm new. Things seem cool here. Awesome. I'm glad to hear that, Duke. That's so nice. I'm just going to pause for a minute and bask in that some new person came in here and say things seem cool here. Well, Duke, you seem kind of cool too. Yeah, this narrative, they will basically burn the whole world down rather than let someone undeserving get a handout. Who are these undeserving people? Explain this to me. Explain to me. This is what I want to start saying to these boomers in serious ways. Who are these undeserving people you're talking about? Right? Hey, Silverlight, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. Who are these undeserving people that we're talking about? Because if I take your Bible, right, with your Christ in it, and Christ says give your money to the poor, right? He doesn't say give your money to the deserving. He doesn't say create a system of judgment by which to determine who should or should not have food or shelter. He says very clearly give your money to the poor. And so my question to these boomers is, why do you think your opinion is more important than your Christ's? Why do you think that way? For real. And especially because, like, you're willing to spend more and you're willing to hurt your society in order to achieve it? Aren't you the people that Christ was fighting against? Aren't you the one that would actually go and crucify your Christ? Because you got to remember, a lot of these guys, they don't make it here, right? They don't make it here. They live here. They live here in their gut. They don't get up here. Maybe they're here a little bit. Right? They're certainly not here. They're not here in their heart, certainly, right? And the insipid sloganeering that comes out of their mouth tells you that, like, they definitely haven't made it here, and they definitely haven't processed anything really, right? Like, it's just stupid slogans. They, like, get a job as a slogan. Like, it's not connected to anything, and it's especially a slogan now when, like, literally you can say I have two, and then what do they say? Like, after you say that, what do they say? Well, get a better job. Oh, okay, buddy. I'll just go get a better job. And again, why would I do that? Because better jobs don't even pay for anything. I don't get, like, a house, right? What do I get for this better job that you seem to think exists? What do I get for it? Seth Botstar, I've been watching for a little while as well. Does seem cool here. Well, Seth Botstar. And you too, Duke. You guys are making me feel good about myself. I gotta tell you, I was having a really, really bad day, and I was like thinking I was gonna come in here and do like a half hour of just talking, and then I was gonna put on a video or something because I was feeling so grumpy. And now you guys are making me feel really good about myself. That's nice. That's really nice, you guys. Like, I know I'm kind of playing it like a little like, oh goodness me, titter titter, but like, really, like, that does mean a lot to me that you guys are saying that. You're coming in and saying that. That's really, really nice. Ah, goddamn, that's nice. Demand better. We have never tried strategic cooperation between parties, with liberals excluded as the crypto-cons they are. Strategic voting in Canada historically means vote liberal to most people. That's the... Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're thinking of more a collaboration between, like, the Greens and the NDP, right? That instead of having, like, a kind of cobbling sort of thing, to have more strength as a unified force moving forward, that maybe then the more left-leaning liberals may be attracted to. Yeah, I got to tell you, dude, I am so despondent with what I'm seeing in the political sector right now, and I'm feeling very cynical and grumpy about it. I think it's probably like, if the NDP ever wants to gain any more support than it has right now, it probably needs to be run by a white man. Like, I hate to say it as straightforwardly as that. I hate to be that mean. Like, but it's like proof's in the pudding, right? Jagmeet Singh's gone nowhere since the beginning of this campaign. That his numbers haven't increased at all. He was actually above this at the start of the campaign. Now, he'll likely stay on because the NDP are actually going to gain seats. But from what I've seen, it looks like this is their support base. These are the people that are willing to vote for a brown man with a turban. We've got them. That we've maximized the number of people who are willing to vote for a brown man with a turban. They're not going to go any further than this. Like, I hope that's not the case. I hope that in the debates, Jagmeet Singh comes out and does a good job. I've been seeing a lot of people saying they've been listening to radio interviews, and lots of people are giving Jagmeet Singh good marks, right? And conservative types right? This is what's interesting about like people who are willing to vote conservative, right? Is that they pretend as though their vote is up for grabs. They're voting conservative, but they're not walking around shitting on Jagmeet. Like, the way that I shit on Aaron O'Toole is way worse than the way they're shitting on Jagmeet, for sure. I'll admit that straight up. But like so the debates are going to be a big tell. Like, the debates are going to be the moment where if Jagmeet Singh and the NDP can sort of break the conservative spell that is being cast on the populace, it will be at the debates. And I am generally of the opinion that if Jagmeet Singh does not experience some kind of increase after the debates, like he did last time, he experienced an increase in support after last time's debates. But if that doesn't happen, then he's capped. He's capped on one single principle. He's a brown guy with a big beard and a turban, and Canadians won't vote for it. And I mean, it's something that the NDP are going to have to struggle with, because that's actually a very unfortunate reality. And like, what do the NDP even do about it, right? What do the NDP even do about it? Can there be a peace made between the supporters of Jagmeet Singh within the NDP and the white man that they will need to elect if they actually want to get support from the Canadian people? Like, I said it before, I'll say it again, man. If Jagmeet Singh was walking around talking the way that he was talking right now and he was a white man, do you think this election would be going this way? Like, these are hard, difficult truths. And so, like, I appreciate that you're walking around saying, like, no, we need to create coalitions and we need to, like, organize better as leftists and all this kind of stuff. But I see a much more significant problem, right? I see a much more significant problem, which is that Canadians aren't going to vote for a brown guy in a turban. They're just not. If they were, they would be, but they're not. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. I would love to see the debates happen, and then suddenly Jagmeet Singh is up 10 points in the polls, and the Conservatives are collapsing, and all of this kind of stuff. Yeah, Bubble Guppy, you're right. I hit it on the nose. I'm like that. I get a little too. I whipped the horse a little too long, so to speak. Beat the dead horse a bit. It's sad, but unfortunately, I think you're right, especially from what we've heard about family members about Singh's race. Do you think Canadians might be too polite for even the NDP to admit this? Yeah, I think Canadians are very, very polite, and that politeness is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, right? Yeah. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are exactly dusting off the fascism at the end here of neoliberalism, right? And they're doing it politely, right? They're doing it as politely as they possibly can. And Canadians constantly want to think the best of their people, right? They constantly want to think that, like, no, there's no way that it's fascism. Like, no, because they always want to think the best. And they just got to put the fork in the socket, right? It's not much different from, like, you know, we all know a young lady who is dating a total loser, right? Or is maybe married to a complete loser, right? Somebody who, like, actively abuses her, or at the very least just completely takes advantage of her, right? We've seen this over and over again. This is like a trope, right? Well, turns out that trope exists in politics as well. That we're watching Canadians abuse themselves. And we're saying, like, hey, we could vote for things that help us, and Canadians are going, nah. And they don't have a rational reason for it, and they don't. All they have is stupid slogans, right? And they don't really understand why they're doing it. And it's not until after some kind of catastrophe, like the catastrophes that we're heading towards, that Canadians start to go, like, well, maybe we should do something about this for real, right? But we have to experience the catastrophe. You got to put the fork in the light socket, right? You can't just say, like, oh, this is going to hurt, so I won't do it. You got to be like, well, this is going to hurt, but let's check. Okay. It's just we have to. We don't have another way of doing it. And again, the numbers are bearing it out. It's those pesky boomers. It's those pesky boomers. and their sons. Ugh. And of course, what's the conclusion here? The NDP could be tough to dislodge from the BC interior and could put some pressure on Conservative seats in Saskatchewan and parts of Ontario, while the Greens might have a hold on Vancouver Island. Gains in Quebec are hard to achieve, and O'Toole's French will be put to the test twice more in leaders' debates. The Conservatives haven't swept Cape Breton since John Diefenbaker's landslide in 1958. Not even Robert Stanfield could pull it off. And there are some indications the Liberals have hit their floor in Ontario. Gaining 14 seats in the province could prove challenging. But it isn't impossible, or even that difficult, to see this path work out for the Conservative. It's there for them. Will it still be there for them by September 20th? Now, I have seen an interesting take on this, which is a lot less horrible, which is, I must have closed it, which is that all that's being indicated right now is that Canadians are willing to bail on the Liberals, but that their vote is up for grabs, right? That the reason they swing towards Conservatives is because they acknowledge that the Liberals are not offering them anything, and the Conservatives actually are, right? The Conservatives were the first ones to stand up and say something about the housing issue, right? Of course, I kind of look at that and I go like, well, that's not really true. Like, the NDP are offering lots of things, right? So if their votes are up for grabs, I don't understand this sort of dead in the water position that the NDP find themselves into. So, and here's a great tweet. 1 in 7 homes are now bought by Wall Street investors. Starter homes prices are rising 7 times faster than renter incomes. The typical renter needs 27 years to save for a 20% down payment on the medium starter home. This is the big crisis not being addressed. Right? This is CNBC.com. They were snatched up in 12 hours. First-time home buyers face stiff competition and high prices. This is why what we are seeing the Conservatives and the Liberals do in regards to the housing conversation is a grift. That nothing they are saying is going to resolve this issue. That what we are experiencing now is the entropy of a dead system, right? That capitalism, specifically neoliberal capitalism, has failed. It is dying, right? It's not like a guy falling over. It's not stumbling, right? There isn't a strain, right? It literally has fallen on the ground, has died, and is now in a state of decomposition. That is where the neoliberal capitalist economy currently is. It is in a state of decomposition, and all we're dealing with now is what parts of the body go where. And if you're a rich billionaire, you get the lion's share, right? Like if you're the big animal in the area, you're the one that gets to tear off and eat the most, right? And that's what we're seeing in regards to this housing crisis, that the billionaires are buying up the land. They're buying up the housing. You could build 100 million houses. You could build as much as you want. You could put in any kind of foreign buyer ban you want. You can do whatever you want. Unless you're actually willing to go to the billionaire class and say, no, these houses we are taking, we are going to assess who needs them, and then we're going to give them to the people who need them. Unless you're actually willing to confront the capitalists, you're not going anywhere. That the millennials and Gen X that are swinging their vote over to conservative are going to be extremely betrayed. Extremely betrayed when housing prices continue to skyrocket, when everything continues to lose its mind. And people keep saying to me like, well, John, eventually the housing market needs to crash, right? Eventually it does. It's like, yeah, dude, it's going to crash. Absolutely. As the entire economy collapses, right? That if the housing market collapses, so too goes with it the entire stock market, right? the entire commodities market, the futures market, the speculation market, it's all going to collapse because the capitalists are betting on it and they know that that's how it's going to go. You've got firms like Vanguard, BlackRock. You've got firms like Citadel. We all remember Citadel from the Robinhood scandal, right? The GameStop story. Well, these guys, what are they doing? Are they buying up shares in the market? Are they paying big dividends in the market to prop up a market? No, they're shorting the market. They're shorting the entire market because they know that it's going to collapse because they're the ones setting the C4 at the pillars of the society. They know it's going to collapse because they're the ones that are doing it. Do you think we will see housing refugees like a dysphoria to more rural areas or something? Yep, I think that's absolutely going to happen. We're going to see a big spike in evictions. We're going to see a big spike. That's already happening in the United States. The eviction crisis is massive throughout the United States right now. You're going to see this. It's going to be the Great Depression again, guys. Like, it's going to be the same story. You're going to see huge groups of people traveling via like rail, right? Trying to go throughout Canada and the United States to find any work they possibly can, right? People will turn into these migratory people moving around the country. And absolutely, you're going to see housing refugees. I've already talked to plenty of people who have said, yeah, like, I'm going to move out of the city. I want a house, right? That they want a house. That's what they, have been working their whole life to achieve. And that's only achievable if they move out to the boonies, bumfuck nowhere. And their society, their job is now kind of a work from home job. So that's what they're going to do, right? And it's shameful, if you ask me, because these billionaires buy up these properties and they sit on them. There's 66,000 empty houses here in Toronto, like with more being built every day. Like these billionaires are doing everything, and they don't care. Like, that's the big thing. The billionaire class doesn't care. It's not interested in caring or building a stable society or anything like this. It's just a business investment to them. And so what you have is you have a class of citizenry who are buying the first grifter who comes along and says, I'll do something about the housing crisis. And then you look at their solutions, and their solutions are literally do nothing about the housing crisis. Okay. Like, build more houses. Go ahead. It's not going to change a thing, right? The people who are falling for this are still the people who don't understand exactly how much $1 billion actually is, right? That, like, $1 billion is a staggering sum of money. It is insane how much money that is. Like, if you have, right, $1 billion, if you make $1 billion and a house costs $1 million, well, buying 100 houses is only a tenth of your wealth that you earned that year. I've heard a statistic, which I haven't quite checked the validity of, that in the US there's something like 5 times more empty houses than homeless people. Yep, that's accurate. That's completely accurate. And of course that number is dropping because the number of homeless people is increasing, right? And but, like, the eviction crisis is going to spike the amount of empty houses that we have, right? The eviction crisis is going to cause all kinds of problems. Hey, guy, how you doing, bud? Really blows my mind how many houses are built and how many are empty, wasting. It's disgusting, of course. That's the system of capital. The capitalist system itself is disgusting, right? It only requires a cursory analysis. Like, if I sat down and just wrote a one-pager about how capitalism started, right? What it took to get us to this point, right? And presented it to somebody and said, here you go, here's the system. Do you want this system in place? Literally no one would say yes, right? Only the most depraved, complete psychopath would say yes to capitalism. The capitalism begins by taking feudal serfs, taking the women and children and putting them to work in factories, right? We all know the Dickens stories where they were putting kids down chimneys, putting kids into mine shafts, all this kind of stuff, right? So they take them off their ancestral land, places they'd been living for 1,000 years in some cases. They take them off their ancestral land, throw them in the factories, throw them into that kind of work while conscripting the men into military service so that they can get onto boats that are created by clear cutting the lumber from the island of England, right? And what do? They go to the continent of Africa, enslave the black population, and then take the black slaves over to the New World where they're committing a genocide against the indigenous populations, right? That's how capitalism begins. It begins by enslaving their own people, enslaving the black African population, and then committing massive genocides against the indigenous people. Capitalism is born through not one, not two, not even three, but way more than that, abominations and genocides. That's your system. And it just continued on from there. To me, capitalism seems to be just as effective as two people handing the same dollar bill back and forth over a table, and one person gaining that the other person has. I mean, capitalism's less effective than that. If the system was legitimately just taking the same dollar bill and passing it back and forth and exchanging like effort and labor for that, like that would actually be an effective economy that works, right? Like, oh, you give me $1 and I give you some apples. I give you $1, you give me some wheat. Oh, and back and forth we go and we trade our goods and commodities, and what a lovely system we have here. But that's not how it works, right? The system is, I have all the dollar, right? I have the dollar, right? You work for me, right? So you do all the work, you get the wheat, you get the apples, you get all this, so then I give you the $1. Ah, but you need a place to sleep. I have all the housing, so you give me the $1 back, right? That's the capitalist system. I think I'm describing what you mean. I think that we're coming to it from the same. You know how that happens sometimes? You get a conversation, right? You get a conversation with somebody and you both realize you're actually talking about the same thing, but you're just coming at, like, one guy's coming this way and the other guy's coming that way, that kind of thing. I think that's what's happening here. And yeah, like the landlord culture that exists is about as illegitimate a system as can exist, right? Like, why are we letting just a private individual own our housing? It's like, no. No. I'm good. Like, I'm good. That's become my position on a lot of this. And then Jesus drug-tested everyone using taxpayer money before deciding if the lazy, freeloading masses were worthy enough to receive fish and bread. I can't feed these people. It will destroy their incentive to better themselves. Once their urine tested clean, Jesus reminded them that this was a temporary assistance and warned against becoming dependent on his handouts. He went on to explain that tax revenues were actually for corporate subsidies and funding war. The word of Jesus Christ. Like, this is how easy it's become, right? This is how easy it's become. But the reality is that these guys don't even care about their own Christ. That they're standing up talking about defending Western Judeo-Christianity. And let's name names, right? You've got your Rex Murphys, your Jordan Petersons, your Stephen Harpers, right? These guys do not give a fuck about Jesus Christ. They do not care about Jesus Christ at all. And the fact that they're attempting to evoke his name while pretending to be his defenders is heresy. These people are hypocrites, liars, and heretics. They need to be exposed as the frauds that they actually are. That Peterson is walking around saying, no, you need to be the author of your own fate and pull yourself up, stand up straight with your shoulders back, in clear defiance of his own Christ. Like, it's become obvious at this point. It's become extremely obvious. And the evangelical Christians in the United States are making it even worse. Like, those guys are just hysterical. They're just living in hysteria. And they're paying the cost. Like the COVID virus that's coming through and wiping these guys out, right, is the cost that they are paying for believing these grifters and listening to these people. And that's going to get worse because there are other variants that are coming, right? There are other variants that are coming. And the amount of mutation that the COVID virus is able to go through, even throughout the United States, but also places like India, right? So we're going to, I am going to make a pretty solid prediction that before this COVID thing is done, we are going to see something that is going to be extremely, extremely contagious and deadly. It is going to be the kind of thing where if you get it, you will die, right? It's going to be very straightforward. And we are in a real fuck around and find out sort of place, and we're going to find out. We're going to find out. It's going to be serious. It's going to be serious. Yeah, here's somebody. I love Twitter and all this kind of stuff because it's regular citizens are starting to just nail this on the head, right? If your boss says, have sex with me or lose your job, is that coercion or freedom of choice? Right? Because according to the people who are defending the capitalist system, that's freedom of choice. Right? How is this any different than saying, work for me or starve? Right? Thoughts on Nathaniel Erskine Smith? Heard some people are pushing to join the NDP. Can't wait for the NDP to dethrone Freeland in University of Rosedale and Marcy Len. I'll be surprised if that happens. I will be. I'll be surprised if Chrystia Freeland goes. Chrystia Freeland is being groomed to be the new leader of that party, right? I don't like her because her family was Nazi collaborators. And I've heard people say to me like, oh, you can't judge her based off of the actions of her family. And I think to myself, yeah, I think in this case I will. Right? And when it comes to Nazi collaboration, I have a pretty firm yeah, I'm okay. I don't need to entertain the idea that your daughter is going to be a decent leader when you were a Nazi collaborator. Pretty straightforward. I have pretty firm lines when it comes to Nazism. Right? It's one of the only things that I have firm lines on. Because if you don't have firm lines on Nazism, then you become a victim of Nazism. But we'll see. We'll see. Crazier things have happened. And again, it does come down to these debates. The 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 debates. A little bit of musical fun. Why not? I'll save that one for just a moment. Yeah, here's this is crazy. Once you've been evicted, you're ineligible to rent most apartments. I hadn't even considered that, right? Like, what landlord is going to take somebody in who has an eviction? Which means 3 million people are about to become unhousable. 3 million. Where will they go? What will they do? Have you read Freeland's book, Plutocrats, The Rise of the Global Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else? I haven't actually read it. Maybe I'd be a little bit more sympathetic. But, I gotta tell you, man, the liberals really had an opportunity. Oh, it's you, Victini. I thought it was Vince that said that. Good to see you. Good to see you, bud. The liberals really had an opportunity to put this basic income in. They could have done it. That if they have passed the CERB and then said, we're going to transition the CERB into a basic income, the NDP would have gone with them, and they would have done it, and it would have become permanent policy. And they had that opportunity, and they refused to do it. And in my view, this is the reason why they're being abandoned. The reason why they're being abandoned is because they had opportunities to make significant change. And, it doesn't matter to me if the liberals are walking around writing books that say Plutocrats, The Rise of the Global Rich and the Fall of Everyone Else, because all that means is that they know better, right? They know better, right? They're the ones that are walking around telling us that they know what's going on. They're the ones that are saying, yeah, we see what's happening here. I'll write a book about it, right? Here, I'll talk about it. Yeah, the plutocrats, there they are, the 1% and everybody else. Yeah, well, now they have a real opportunity to put in a policy that would actively confront that system, and they won't. And they won't. Hey Ruth, how you doing? And all while this is happening, he's worried about going to a dog rescue and talking about puppy mills and helping animals instead of people. Yeah, and that's just another shield, right? That's just another that's like the political equivalent of kissing a baby, right? Oh, look at Aaron O'Toole, he cares. Doesn't he care? He kisses a baby. He's got a little baby and he kisses. Oh, look, he's got a puppy. Look, he's got a puppy. I'm going to end the practice of puppy milling. These puppies need more love and care because I'm Aaron O'Toole and I care about puppies. And the sad reality is that, like, people who are willing to vote for conservative and likely liberals, right, they care more about puppies than people, right? That if we cared more about people, then, or even the same, even if we cared the same amount as about people as we did puppies, we would be saying like, well, hey, how about you actually help these people who are falling into despair, who can't find work, right? The work they can find is shitty and doesn't actually pay their bills, right? How about you actually help them? But oh, he's got a little puppy. Oh, it's so cute. And don't fool yourselves, guys. Like, Canadians are that gullible. They're 100%. There's 100% going to be people walking around talking about that, who are going to say of Aaron O'Toole, he's such a good man, he cares about the puppies. For sure. Right? Fuck people. No, those people are undeserving. They need to get better jobs. Right? Maybe we should send people to rescues in the SPCA. Yeah. I mean, we essentially do. That's essentially what the shelter system is. Yeah. The Koch family could literally pay the entire $20 billion to end homelessness in America and still be $13.4 billion richer than they were before the pandemic. Instead, they funded an effort to end the eviction moratorium that could throw millions out on the street. Greed kills. No. First of all, hey, how you doing? TRCR? T-Racer? Aaron O'Toole Puppy Mills. O'Toole pledges to ban puppy mills, combat animal abuse. And, like, don't get me wrong, like, super
I would like
happy.
to thank the humane societies and SPCAs across the country and their wonderful staff and volunteers.
I actually, like, there's a couple of policies that O'Toole is running on. Like, he's running on increasing disability support. He's running on this kind of thing, right? Like, this is how bad the campaign the Liberals are running is. The Liberals are running probably the worst campaign in the history of Canada. I certainly in my lifetime, I've never seen a campaign this bad come out of the incumbent people. It's like Trudeau is just not even interested in.
Who've been doing great work to care for abused and abandoned animals
And he looks
to
good.
advocate for them. In 2019, they took in about 78,000 cats and about 28,000 dogs through their shelters. While the surge in pet ownership during the pandemic helped many of these animals find their forever homes, we also know it brought to light other issues. Due to demand, we saw a growth in puppy mills and illegal imports, criminal groups taking advantage of Canadians' love for their pets.
Well, and I have a pug, right? And you want to talk about puppy mills? What the puppy mills did to pugs is a crime on nature itself, right? But the close-in snout, the fact that these dogs are walking around, they can't breathe. If the temperature goes above room temperature, they pass out. They're more prone to seizures, all that kind of stuff. So absolutely ban that shit. I'm happy to see it. And like, human beings are complex, crazy individuals, and it is actually believable for me to think that someone like Aaron O'Toole is sitting there being like, yeah, we got to take care of the disabled. Clearly, they're disabled. Yeah, we got to take care of these animals, right? All that kind of stuff. But, you know, if you're a working Canadian, just go get a job, right? Completely believable to me. Yeah, they're appealing to the Mackenzie brothers. Yeah, absolutely. I'm engaged in the revolutionary act of stealing Wi-Fi to tune in. Yay. Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on this, T. Not class presidents or who gets to take the hamster home. Yeah, I love animals. This is nuts. Cue Sarah McLachlan songs. Yeah. Spend all your time waiting for that special chance, for the thing that will make it okay. Do yourself a favor, by the way. Listen to Sarah McLachlan's Arms of the Angel, right? And realize, right from the beginning, realize that she's talking about PCP, right? That song is about taking drugs. That's what's so funny to me, is that song became like evangelical Christian fodder. Like I was in a choir that sang that song, like a Christian choir that sang that song. The Arms of the Angel. Listen to it, man. Listen to it. It's about taking drugs in a hotel room. That's what it's about. PCP, also known as angel dust, right? In the arms of the angels, fly away from here. In this dark, cold hotel room, and the emptiness that you fear, you are pulled from the wreckage of this silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angels, may you find some comfort here. It's PCP. She's talking about doing PCP in a hotel room. And Jesus Christ is literal. Tim Dillon. How dare you bring the name of Tim Dillon into this, dude? Tim Dillon is just a businessman. He doesn't give a shit about anything. Yeah, no. Tim Dillon is just saying what people will pay him to say. That's Tim Dillon, right? He's actually very smart. That's the thing that drives me crazy about Tim Dillon, is that he is actually very smart. Smart enough to know that if I say what people who will pay me to say it, then he'll... Yeah, he admits it, exactly. Like, he's not a good faith actor. That's the thing that drives me crazy about Tim Dillon. Is that, like... And people still buy into him. People still listen. He admits he's a bad faith actor. He admits that he's not interested in actually having a reasonable, rational discourse. He admits that he's not interested in defending a position because it's a moral position that should be defended. He admits all of this. And people are just like, yeah, Tim Dillon, he's worth listening to. But, like, I'll take the compliment. That's fine. I think if Tim Dillon can be successful, so can I. Fred Koch founded the John Birch Society, which any rural American ran into its anti-communist members. Yeah, lying through his teeth about holding corporations accountable and being coy. Yeah, about abortion and vaccines, being personal medical choices. Yeah, all garbage. All garbage. Ugh. Okay, speaking of singing, there's a lot of new guys in the room today, so you guys are going to love this. You guys are going to love this. About 7 o'clock, or when I feel like I need to calm down a little bit because I get kind of angry doing this, I like to whip out this song. This is a song that I wrote probably maybe a month ago now. I call this the Care Bear Stare Against Capitalism because there's nothing they could do about it. If everybody in the world started to sing this song, there's nothing they could do about it. And so I'm trying to spread this around. This is called Antarctica is Covered in Ice. Got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm old? I look looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes to sweep me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? When everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Everybody's happy, and Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I believe that we can do it, because the solution to the problem that we are facing is easy. We don't need to do anything. We don't need to create a new technology. We don't need to transition to something. We don't need to do anything. All we have to do is stop. That we have engaged in a war against the earth itself, and it is a war that we will lose. And should we finally stop, we will sit back in awe and bear witness to the miracle of the earth healing itself. This place was a garden before we got here. It will be a garden when we're gone. And if we want to bear witness to the full power of the earth as it heals itself, then all we have to do is stop. I haven't recorded that as an MP3 yet. It's on my channel on YouTube. You can just type in Antarctica. It's covered in ice. You'll find it. But gross! Right, Alan? I don't think I've seen you here in a long time, Alan. Good to see you, bud. Man, everybody's coming in this Monday, man. What's going on? Is it raining everywhere? Is that what's happening? I'm glad you're here, though. Victini, phencyclidine, yeah, just another one of those battlefield medicines, vegetarian drugs like ketamine developed during Vietnam War because morphine suppressed the respiratory system too much. Isn't that the drug that they're all taking down in the States now? When did I start? I've always been singing, but I came out of the womb singing. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has a gift that's been given to them by the world, and that's the gift that I was given. And I know that that's true, and I've always known it. And my hope is that I can use that gift, along with the gift of gab, obviously, but that I can use that gift to cause some real damage to this system. Because I really do believe that if everybody on Earth started to sing that song, that there's nothing the neoliberal capitalists could do about it. There's nothing that they could do against a people walking around hopefully singing a song that demands change. That demands, and not only demands change, but very specifically and well articulated change. No more homelessness. No more hunger. Antarctica covered in ice. Everybody's happy. Wouldn't that be nice? I don't think there's a thing they could do about it, except reveal themselves as the demons that they are, which is just as good. Because this election in particular is really showing me, like, lots of people are walking around thinking that, like, no heart isn't no heart, you know? Like, lots of people are walking around looking at Skeletor and being like, yeah, Skeletor, maybe I'll vote for Skeletor this time. Like, it would be really nice if these guys just came out and admitted to everybody that they want people to be homeless. That's what they want. They want people to be homeless. They want people to be hungry. That's what they want. That they don't give a shit if Antarctica is covered in ice or not, right? None of that matters to them. It'd be really nice if they just came out and were honest about it. And I feel like that song makes it happen. Ugh. The other side effect that I really like about that song is that it feels nice to play. I don't really play much of my other songs or my other music on this channel because they're all very heavy. They're very heavy. They're very bluesy and very, like, the earth is in decline. And you guys know, that's the big thing. So I don't need to sing those songs on this channel. But I don't know what to do about this Nova Scotia to record it and make it into an MP3 and then distribute it. Like, I don't know how to do any of that. Trump was literally the archetype of so many movie villains in the 80s and 90s. Yeah, it's true. You saw that, who was that? That was the Some More News guy, Cody? Cody Shoddy? You're outing yourself, Duke. You're outing yourself as being well-read and and watching good sources. If you guys haven't seen what we're talking about here, I highly recommend, easy recommend, Some More News. This guy. Some More News. right? Jeff Bezos didn't learn a damn thing in space. He does one approximately every week or so, and they're always extremely they're always extremely well researched. They're always extremely well spoken. They're always extremely well done. Mark, I'm more of a country guy myself. It's not what I listen to, but it's just what is in my heart. And anytime I play a song, it ends up coming out pretty country. There's a free program called Audacity. I've got Audacity, but what I mean is I don't know where to host it. Like, I don't know where to put it. I think I actually have. Do I have a copy of that song? Anyway. Yeah. What am I doing? I'm on YouTube. Get out of here. What am I doing? Talking about this disaster. Yeah. So, some people come in here every now and again, and they grumble about Jimmy Dore. And I get it. Jimmy Dore is who he is, right? And that's fine. But every so often I find a Jimmy Dore clip that I think is actually really illustrates why Jimmy Dore is an important figure in the discourse today. And so I'm going to take a bit of a break and play this clip. This is Jimmy Dore with Chris Hedges. Chris Hedges doesn't get on any of the mainstream outlets, and that by itself, the fact that Jimmy Dore is platforming somebody like Chris Hedges, is already important. So
ever since I started advocating and organizing along class lines, I've been getting hit with the weirdest attacks. I've been attacked for having a house, attacked for talking to conservatives against imperialism. They just attacked me for tweeting a mainstream medical research paper. How real do you think the American left is about creating class consciousness and solidarity?
I think I read Thomas's book, his book before last on the liberal class. I think he kind of gets it. It's the classic attempt by self-identified liberals to feel good about themselves. That's what this is really about. It's about validating themselves. It's about kind of celebrating their moral righteousness and purity. It's not about political effectiveness. It's not really about helping anyone. And the energy of the left, there's a kind of circular firing squad where they spend most of their energy and time attacking you, Glenn Greenwald. This guy's just attacked right and left. Matt Taibbi, and I admire all three of you. And that's where all of their energy goes. And that again feeds into this notion of their own kind of moral superiority. But of course, they're not attacking the real centers of power, because if you do that, as my friend Julian Assange did, there's a real cost.
So when did what do you? I don't want to be. I want to be optimistic that at some point the people will be able to throw off the chains of their co-opters and all the garbage that has happened with all these organizations that I just gave that litany of that have now been co-opted, from Bernie's Our Revolution to the Justice Democrats to Progressive Democrats, all of DSA, all of them nowhere to be found at a Medicare for All march. It's just amazing. That shows you there. So what is there going to be a trigger? I mean, I thought these lockdowns, because none other country did it like this. Every other country, if they locked you down, they tried to pay most of your salary. They didn't do that here in the United States. What do you think? If that didn't do it, what will something do it, you think?
Well, there already is a backlash. The problem is the backlash is a right-wing proto-fascist backlash. And that backlash has the same kind of roots. The rupture of social bonds, the insecurity, the lack of a future, the frustration, the feeling of neglect. And unless the left begins to address that very real, what Durkheim calls anomie, but that angst, and that suffering, and it's a legitimate suffering, then we're finished politically. And that's why I really blame the left, and in particular, the self-identified left or liberal class within the Democratic Party, for feeding this kind of proto-fascism. I mean, never forget that Trump didn't create this. This was really created by the Christian fascists. I wrote a book called American Fascists, the Christian Right in the War in America, and I got a lot of heat for using the word fascist. But I'm a seminary graduate, I grew up in the church, I'm both biblically and theologically literate, and these people are heretics. Jesus did not come to make us rich. Jesus does not bless the white race above other races, and in particular the American white race. Jesus wouldn't bless the dropping of iron fragmentation bombs and militarized drones in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera. So they've sacralized the worst elements of American capitalism and American imperialism. Trump tapped into that, and what comes with it, of course, is this kind of magical thinking, where people are so beaten down by a reality-based universe that has discarded them in many ways, that they walk into this world of God will address their material needs and take care of them and all this kind of. And of course, this movement is bankrolled by the most retrograde elements of American capitalism, Purdue, Walmart, Hobby Lobby, all these people, because if Jesus takes care of you, then you don't need universal health care. You don't need a union because Jesus is going to take care of you. So it's a very pernicious movement, and it's only going to grow. I mean, at the end of that book, I spent 2 years on it, I came to the conclusion that the only way to thwart it was to reintegrate these people back into the economy. We're not going to win an argument about creationism or whether Adam and Eve rode a T-Rex with a saddle in the Garden of Eden, as I saw in the Creationist Museum in Peterborough, Kentucky. And this is the failure. The left in this country has forgotten the fundamental importance of economics and the fundamental issue, which is class warfare, which we're losing. And of course, they've written all these people off, and many of them are my own family. I come from rural, lower class Maine on my mother's side, and many of them support Trump, and they hold opinions that I find repugnant about, all sorts of people and issues, but the suffering that they endure is real. And we have to go in and address that suffering, address that economic assault. And by not doing it, by essentially celebrating ourselves as moral arbiters and as righteous people, and a lot of this has to do now with kind of linguistic, shaming and all this kind of stuff. You know it better than I do. We're finished. We're ceding the ground to very, very dangerous forces that may indeed, after the next House elections, take control.
So I hear a lot of people who, I call it the establishment left, the boutique left also, say things like we have to organize along class lines, and they don't mean it for a second. They don't mean it, because what that means, organizing along class lines, means organizing with Trump voters. That's what that means. And they won't ever allow you to even talk to them, right? If I go on Tucker Carlson to talk to half the country, I get pilloried for it, even though I'm bringing a progressive message. Even after Tucker Carlson credited me with changing his mind about Julian Assange, which means half the country now hears that message. I mean, so they don't want, so that's what drives me crazy, right? We have to, when you organize along class lines, that means you find common ground. A lot of people on the right want to end the wars. They're now for single payer. A lot of them are for student debt relief. A lot of them are always for living wage. That's enough stuff to organize a political party around. And now if either side wants to get elected, they have to come to us. That's my idea. I'm trying to do that with Nick Branda over at the People's Party. What do you think of that idea?
Of course. Lord Salisbury, who was a shit, but I mean, he said there are no permanent allies, there's only permanent power. Saul Alinsky picked this up too. When I sued Barack Obama over Section 1021 of the National Defense Authorization Act, there were a series of amicus briefs from libertarians, Ron Paul, all this kind of people. There are many issues I disagree with them on, but on that we found common ground around civil liberties. So yes, of course we do. I mean, that's the point. But I think we have to understand that the motive of the left is not to be effective. The motive of the left is to celebrate themselves. And if you understand that, then everything, how ineffectual they are, everything they do and say makes sense. It's not about political effectiveness. It's not about, it's about building a monument to themselves, and they've certainly done that.
So let's talk about, speaking of Alan Dershowitz,
I just want to pause it right there because that what he just said there really flows into what I'm becoming suspicious about of the leftists that exist within the discourse today. And I'm talking about your like David Doles and your Thought Slimes and like all the Rational National, right? Like these leftist YouTubers that I'm seeing, right? Good reporters, good essayists, right? I don't mean to shit on them from those perspectives. I think that's all fine work, but that is all them erecting their own business for themselves, right? That they have managed to find success on their channels and on these things, but they care more about their business than they do about the movement, right? That they're not going to do anything to threaten the position that they found themselves in. And I'm really noticing this as I'm attempting to try and mobilize people to try and get them out on the streets. Like someone like David Dole, for God's sakes, has 400,000 subscribers, right? He could start releasing, like once a week, he could just release a statement saying, hey, everybody, we're going to meet here for a protest on this issue, whatever issue, like, and he could get 1,000 people out right off the bat. I'm convinced of it, right? But he doesn't. Why not? Because he is building a monument to himself. He cares about his business before he cares about the movement. Have I watched Saint Andrewism? I don't know what that is. Saint Andrewism. Saint Andrewism. Nope. I haven't seen anything about this. But, like, at this stage in the game, guys, like, we need to be getting into the streets. Like, we need to be getting into the streets. And you're absolutely right, Victini. Like, identity politics has created a divide that prevents class consciousness. Well, and liberals use that as a shield, right? Like, liberals use that as a way to deflect away from class issues and continuously bring it back to gender issues, because liberals can have those conversations, but they can't have actual conversations regarding class issues. I'll take a look at this guy. Sam Cedar has 1 point. Any specific video? Because his videos are actually relatively short, it looks like. Well, not all of them. Oh, certainly not all of them. Certainly not most of them. Yeah. Yeah, but Sam Cedar's a great, exactly what I'm talking about, right? He has 1.5 million subs, right? But like, they're not mobilizing anybody. They're not trying to get anybody into the streets. They're not trying to actually do what needs to be done to create political energy around any of these ideas that are desperately important, right? Like, I have a protest that I am organizing on September 18th, 2 p.m. here in Toronto, Yonge and Dundas Square. If you are here in Toronto, September 18th, 2 p.m., come to Yonge and Dundas Square, right? We're having a protest, and we're going to be doing that protest probably once a month. Maybe pick it up, right? Maybe become more disruptive. But like, we could really use support. We could use more people coming out to it. And if somebody like David Dole started to talk about it, or even Thought Slime or any of these guys, right? So far, the one that I've really noticed is the Bothered Boy, right? He's only got like 2,000 subscribers, but like, he's doing it. I've never understood the effectiveness, purpose of protests, at least when they end up being relatively small. You got to think about it like it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, okay? Like, it's never, ever the case in history that everybody just went, let's go have a protest, and then suddenly everybody's in the street, like 1 million people in the streets, right? It has always been the case that when you start a protest movement, it starts small. No, I absolutely understand. Because it doesn't, because we are so trained as a people to believe in electoralism and believe that electoralism is the only way forward, okay? But protests, what protests do more than anything is they allow everybody to be in the same space at the same time and look around one another and go, aha, we actually do think this way. Aha, we actually do believe in this. We actually do, as a people, want this. Because so much of what happens in our society and the information that we receive is funneled through channels which have every reason to obfuscate and smokescreen and take you and isolate you and put you down corridors and separate you. And if everybody is on the street at the same time saying we want to fight against this, then you can't bullshit them anymore, right? You have to at least talk to them. You have to at least talk to them. You can't just shrug and ignore them. Think about the climate change protests that happened here in Toronto. In the climate change protest, like 100,000 people were on the streets in the climate change protest. And that's very scary for politicians to deal with. Because if you have 100,000 people in the streets, well, what happens if they don't leave? Right? What happens if they don't leave? What happens if they decide to break off and start going to your house? What happens then? Right? So big, giant protest movements are enormously threatening. They're enormously threatening to the power structures and the structures that exist. And here in Toronto, right after those climate change protests, the very next thing that happened was the Trudeau Liberals declared a climate emergency. They had to respond. They had to respond. So protest movements are important for two reasons. Reason one, they effectively change the culture, right? They're the most effective way to change the culture because the people can see it and you can't bullshit anymore. Oh, we're all here to talk about this issue. Yeah, here we are. So all the obfuscation and all the media manipulation and all that falls away. And what's left are people on the streets acknowledging the truth of the position. So that's one. And then two, it forces the political class to respond. And there are many ways they can respond, right? Like in the United States, they responded by clearing the Occupy movement encampments, right? But the Occupy movement is the reason why people have a better understanding of the income inequality that exists within the United States and Canada, right? And so protest movements, in my view, are the most crucial thing. Yeah, politicians are principally concerned with retaining power. Protest demonstrates a threat to power by threatening electoral success. And more than anything, protests break everything apart. They break it all down, right? Like, if take a look at what happened in the Black Lives Matter protests, the George Floyd protests, right? Suddenly, every politician and every corporation has suddenly got a Black Lives Matter flag, right? They literally politicians taking the knee, that kind of shit, right? Like, very important seminal moments. And like, you will go to a protest and there will be 10 people. That definitely is going to... Greta Thunberg, actually. You listen to Greta Thunberg talk about this, right? She started her climate change protests, and it literally was just her. That she would go with her sign and she would protest in front of City Hall, and it was just her. She would go after school on Friday, right? And then there was like a steady build-up where more people came. Then suddenly there were hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, right? And more importantly than any of that, the organizers of these protests never know when they're going to explode, right? That the organizers themselves suddenly look around and are like, oh, damn, there's 1 million people here. Like, there's 100,000 people here, right? So it is just about continuing to do it. You will feel disheartened. You will lose. You will have cops assault you. You will have these things happen. It's a guarantee. And then one day, there'll be 100,000 people in the streets with you. Hey, King Ivan, how you doing? It goes, bud. It goes. Yeah, they tried successfully to co-opt the message. Yeah, that's the next step, right? That if the power structure wants to co-opt, I would say that the liberals were successful at doing that in regards to the climate change message for a little bit. But now the bluff has been called, right? The bluff has been called. We know that they're doing bullshit. We know it's not enough. We know. Like, we're well aware. Trudeau bought a pipeline, for God's sakes. Like, we know. Like, if you're actually genuinely interested in climate change proposals, you don't really need to support the liberals anymore. We know. Well, come out. September 18th. September 18th, 2 p.m., Yonge and Dundas. Come on out. Bring a friend. Have a sign. It's an anti-poverty protest. Oh, you guys have said a lot. Demonstrating that there is a popular movement threatens liberal power. Yep, it has been effective against the Ontario Ford government. He's waffled on issues when he saw there was popular support. Yeah. We demonstrate popular support by protesting publicly. Exactly. And because for every person that's willing to come out onto the street, you can be sure shooting that there are 10 that are also voting along those lines. Right? Because people are so fucking exhausted. Like, think about how difficult it actually is to come out to a protest. Like, you're sacrificing one of your days off to do it. Right? Like, that's a big ask. It's a big ask. And most people who are just ground down by this capitalist system are going to take the day or two that they have, and they're not going to come down to a protest where there's going to be 10 people and you get confronted with cops and all this kind of stuff. No, that's not going to happen until one day they all do. And there's no telling, like, when does that energy hit? No one knows. No one knows. So, September 18th, 2 p.m., I'll tell my friends who live in Toronto to come out. Great. Whatever your political beliefs, the disabled should have funds for the necessities. Absolutely. That's what I keep saying. That that giving support to the disabled is a non-political issue. Like, unless you are a fascist, unless your political position is let's abandon these people, if you are even a far-right conservative, you should be saying we should take care of the disabled, right? Which is what's so troubling about Doug Ford, saying, like, he keeps saying this rhetoric of, like, yeah, we got to get these disabled people back to work. I'm like, you get that, like, the definition of being disabled is that you can't work, right? You understand that, right? Have I invited Thought Slime? I wonder if he would accept. I at him on the tweets that I send out. We'll see. It'd be great if he did. It'd be wonderful if he did. Honestly. Like, I would like to see all of these leftists come out. I would like to see a genuine leftist movement. Because that's the thing about Canada, right? Is that, like, that's the other thing about protests, right? Like, what's the difference between someone who has a YouTube channel and somebody who is using that YouTube channel to actually galvanize people and get them onto the streets? Well, one of those is serious, right? And the other one just kind of has a business. And so if suddenly Thought Slime was on the streets, I think that would give him a lot of credibility. I think it would give all these guys a lot of credibility. Like, come out and protest. Like, where's your protest? Put your money where your mouth is, right? Come out, protest. Talk. We bring out a mic. Talk into the mic, right? Do a speech. We let people talk. Politicians are nothing but tide waiters with no opinions of their own. Well, and Trudeau especially. Like, Trudeau is essentially just reads from cue cards, right? Like, he doesn't actually have thoughts or opinions. New Orleans has demonstrated that we can defeat climate change with savvy public-private partnerships to facilitate the building of levees and seawalls around all the coasts. Of course, we need to make some difficult means-tested decisions about what is most valuable to protect. Yeah, okay. Or they just pull in the cops. Yeah, lucky the police were helping us the last time. It feels like with the clearing of the encampments, the police are very aware that that was a PR disaster for them. Like, what with the George Floyd protests, the defund the police, all this kind of stuff. Like, the police, I think, are beginning to realize, like, hey, we've got to start working with the populace. Like, we can't just beat the shit out of them, right? And especially, like, you're starting to see serious things happen in the United States. Like, there are states that are defunding the police. They are doing it. And, like, if I'm a police officer right now in Toronto, I'm kind of looking at my fellow police officers and being like, hey, do you want your budget cut? I don't want my budget cut. Maybe let's make nice. Maybe let's cooperate. Maybe let's actually help these people. Are you joining the UBI protest? When is that, Ruth? First I've heard of it. Yeah, protests break through, mass propaganda. He came in Toronto, pretty beat. Other protests for the Trudeau rally. Another protest for the Trudeau rally. Cops this time, yeah. There's a shocking amount of People's Party support in Saskatchewan this year. COVID is bringing the imperialists out. Well, and the People's Party is like a true white supremacist party. Like the infection of white supremacy throughout the Conservative Party is real, but the People's Party is pretty much a black and white. I shouldn't say black and white. I should just say white. It's a white supremacist party. Like it's pretty scary to see. They forget we need more because we are disabled. Conservatives don't care. If they could, they would kill seniors and the disabled because we are no use to them. I think there's truth to that. Eileen anarchist. Well, and I don't think that it matters. Like, I say that I'm a communist, but I will work with anarchists and I will work with socialists, right? I'll work with liberals. I'll work with conservatives if they're going to come out and support, right? If conservatives start showing up to disabled protests or to poverty protests, welcome aboard. Glad to have you. Because, again, I'll say it over and over again, there are some issues that I consider to be non-political. Like, giving disabled people enough so that they can survive is a non-political issue in my perspective. Like, if you are disagreeing with that, then you're, like, just a crazed sociopath. Like, that's not a political position. Have you seen these mad sheriff departments in the States? Power ordained by God? Yeah, classic shit. You should see how they market themselves in Scarborough. So angering. There was a guy wearing red suspenders and going door to door with People's Party. Yeah. I've heard too many stories of the subtle ways police intimidate and win the support of politicians to think that they would ever consider making nice. I mean, and there is also just the very simple aspect of, like, not every police officer, and it is true, like, I've worked with police officers. I used to work in funeral services. I would go to crime scenes and I would get bodies and things like this and bring them to the city morgue, right? And I don't believe that every single police officer is there just to be a bully and beat the shit out of people. I think that there are police officers that are police officers because they do genuinely want to keep things orderly and help the populace. No, but you're right about that. Like, that's what makes this difficult. Police are the tools of capital. You don't need to be sorry about that statement. They are the tools of capital. That's their job, right? Their job is to protect the property of the capitalist class. That's their primary job. But that doesn't stop them from being human beings. And that doesn't stop them from having base humanity, right? And that's what makes this conversation so complex and so difficult to handle, right? Is that you can have situations where police are looking, like the central organizer for the organization that I'm a part of, which is called POOF, Protecting ODSP Ontario Works Funding, is the acronym. She is a trans woman who has several disabilities, and she's the central organizer for all of this. And I think that the police officers that she's managed to get on her side have looked at her and been like, and listened to her, and have said, yeah, like, when you show up to shut this street down, which is what she's doing now, and what I am a part of doing, I will be there to make sure that it all goes smoothly and that there's no ruffled feathers, right? Because we've had times where we've shown up and the police have just arrested people. And of course, who did they arrest? The little brown guy, right? Like, yeah. There isn't even an NDP rep in my area. I had to vote for a guy in an Ottawa riding. Yeah, I'm doing a mail-in ballot. Good idea, Ruth. Good idea. Yeah, my federal NDP candidate does not even have an office or contact information on the internet. paper candidate. I do think that the NDP are lacking in organization this time. If I wanted to be a little less insane about my analysis, not insane, but just I do think that the NDP are lacking in resources. And demand better, you're right on the money, man. Defund the police makes a lot of sense if the money is used to fund other community services. Yep, because those are often more effective at preventing crime. And living in New York, for example. So after the George Floyd protests, one of the things that they started to do is that instead of sending police to domestic disturbances, they started sending social workers, right? So instead of a dude with a gun showing up and being like, ma'am, I need you to calm down, ma'am, shoot your dog, right? Instead of that, you get a person without a gun, right? You just get a person that shows up and just kind of stands and listens and any kind of conversation or anything and tries to de-escalate and resolve the issue, and it's been extremely successful. Yeah, the Green Party it's the infighting that's killing them right now. They're having an internal fight, and it's a legitimate internal fight. And the fight is reflective of the fight within the populace. That we are fundamentally having a fight between neoliberal capitalism and socialism. That's the central fight of our populace these days. And it's most manifest itself within the Green Party. And because the Greens stuck with neoliberal capitalism, even though it's the most compassionately articulated version of neoliberal capitalism, it's really, really hurt them. I think they would have been better off going full socialist last time. I think at the very least they would have moved forward with more solidarity. Because the position of the socialist side within the argument sees neoliberal capitalism as something that needs to be overcome, whereas the neoliberal capitalists see it as a system that we can use to continue forward with, right? And I of course lean more on the no, neoliberal capitalism got us into this problem. It's not going to get us out. If officers had to live in their communities, that service would help a lot too. Yeah, that's odd, eh? It's odd that police can live in some gated community across the city or something, but then end up policing some other community. That seems very strange to me. I think police officers should live in the communities that they police. As a non-elite party, I can see why our private donation-based system forces NDP to signal to the middle class when they are working class at their core. The leadership of NDP need to be more radical. I mean, again, demand better. This sort of faces up with, can someone like Jagmeet Singh be more radical? Do you think? What do you think happens to him if he does that? Really? Suddenly, brown man, big beard, turban, starts coming forward with a radical agenda? I really do hate to bring it back to that, man, but I just am not seeing any NDPers actually bring this up. And it's got to be confronted. It's got to be talked about in real serious ways. I don't think the NDP are going to win an election anytime soon. Which is a shame. NDP is non-elite. Check out their top organization. Nah, I mean, compare the top organization of the NDP to the top organization of the Liberals or the Conservatives. And yeah, the NDP is non-elite, dude. It's always a compare and contrast. Justin Trudeau is a literal prince. He was literally groomed to be the Prime Minister of Canada. Aaron O'Toole is part of an oil baron cabal that Stephen Harper, former Prime Minister, is part of. Former military. What's Jagmeet Singh? A lawyer? The police live outside the community they police to more easily avoid social repercussions, yeah. Which, doesn't that sound crazy? You say that out loud and it's just sounds crazy. I wish I could again what you said about police. I completely agree with, yeah. Yeah, I'm a bit confused by this YouTube system. I wish the YouTube system was a little bit more clean in regards to commentary and things like that. The NDP raise less money and get no coverage, so they get to define themselves or their policies in the public mind. So a radical agenda would be slurred. For sure. For sure it would be slurred. It'd be easy to slur, too, right? How like, as grotesque and disgusting as this is, like, how long before the People's Party people started to say it was all Sharia law, right? And don't kid yourself, that kind of stuff works. Right? Like, that gets into the consciousness of the conservative base, and suddenly they start looking at Singh not as a Canadian, but as some, like, crazed Islam guy. A radical agenda gets more attention. Yeah, there's something to that. Would you say the Liberals and Conservatives dominate the media narrative in Canada? Sorry, yes. Bubble Guppy, yeah, absolutely. Well, and most of the media outlets here in Canada are owned by conservatives, right? The Toronto Star, the Globe and Mail, the National Post, Global News, CTV, I'm sure there are others that I'm just missing right now, are all owned by conservatives who recommend voting conservative. We also have the CBC, and the CBC is state-owned, and so they are typically beholden to who is in power at the time. Right, and so right now that's the Liberals. So, and yeah, and also the millionaire media or the billionaire media bias, right? Like, the National Post was literally started by Conrad Black, a completely sociopathic billionaire who doesn't give a shit. Yeah, Singh is a career politician, but the core support for the NDP is working class. Yeah, our support has waxed and waned with union jobs. Yeah, there's that too. And, I mean, they're already saying things about him being gay, a buddy to Trudeau, backing the Libs, not a real Canadian. Yeah, exactly, Ruth, exactly. So, like, the NDP are in this real strange position right now. I actually really like Singh. I think that he would actually be a very good leader for Canada. And honestly, I think he would be a good leader right now. That right now, his ascension into leadership in Canada would be very timely, right? Not only because of his social issues, but because of who he is as a person, right? Like, what better way to signal to the rest of the Western world that, you know, it's time to grow up, it's time to move on, it's time to become part of the, civilized world, right? Than electing someone like Jagmeet Singh. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. Yeah, exactly. Conservatives and Liberals, $70,000 a year private school graduates. They're the plutocracy. Yeah. That Con 1488 secure our future dog whistle tweet has scared the PPC into going more mask off, I suspect. I had PPC come to my door the other day and they asked me to join their Telegram group. Telegram group? Telegram group? That's hilarious. It's so you cannot convince Canadians that secure our future dog whistle tweet is legitimate. Like, you can't do it. And people, like, literally people just go, huh, and they move on, and then just deletes out of their brain. They're not interested in moving forward. They're not interested. So, like, I'll put this guy over here. Okay. Where am I here? Yeah, the Coke. This is the absurdity of it all, right? Like, people like the Koch brothers should be tried as traitors and criminals to humanity, if you ask me. Like, the Koch family could literally pay the entire $20 billion to end homelessness and still be richer. Nah, they're just not interested in that. This is why it's dangerous to have billionaires in your society, right? It's dangerous to have even a single billionaire in your society. That having a billionaire, in my perspective, is no different than passing legislation or having a skyscraper just collapse. Like, if here in the city of Toronto, one of the skyscrapers just suddenly collapsed, people would be, like, up in arms. There would be people asking questions. There would be a big investigation. There would be huge amounts of regulations and regulatory oversight and politicians making statements and passing legislation and all this kind of stuff. And the same should happen if there's one billionaire in your society. That it should raise enormous alarm bells. It should create enormous public distress. That the public should literally be screaming at the top of their lungs, why did you let this skyscraper collapse? Why did you let a billionaire exist? But now the billionaire class has essentially taken over the society. So Canadian media presents the conflict as between PC and libs to manufacture consent. Yep. We believe there are only two choices because the media presents it that way. I like Singh. Him getting kicked from the House for not apologizing for calling racism sold me on him. Yeah. And the Canadian media does a good job pretending like the Conservatives and the Liberals are two distinct parties when they are allies with one another. When they are the same party, right? That as soon as you actually recognize that the Conservatives and the Liberals are the same party, the business party, right? They're the capitalist party. Once you understand that, then the relationship between them makes an awful lot of sense. And they will happily bicker and maintain the illusion of difference along identity issues, right? They'll happily do that. But when it comes time to actually vote along capitalist lines, they're in perfect lockstep with one another. They are in perfect lockstep with one another. Okay, guys, my dog is caught in a little reverse sneezing thing. If you can hear that snorting, that's him. So I'm gonna play more of this, okay, while I deal with this.
He is also named in the Epstein scandal. He wrote a book called The Case for Vaccine Mandates. I'd just like to get your thoughts on the vaccine mandates and passports.
So I got the vaccine.
Me too.
Wow.
Me too.
And you you had health issues over.
Yeah.
I mean, fact is, these things were rolled out without proper vetting. That's real, and I think people's concerns are real. And that was a decision that I made to get it. But I also understand how people are wary about it because these things were turbocharged, and of course, these corporations are making staggering profits from disseminating it throughout the market. And I am quite certain in the history of pharmaceuticals, the tobacco industry, the animal ag industry, everything else bears this out, that they work very hard to bury the negative consequences. So I have a certain sympathy. On the other hand, with the Delta variant now, and I think perhaps we should call it a new name rather than a variant. It's more virulent and more dangerous. So that was a decision that I made.
What do you? I've seen the politicization of COVID around because of Trump. Not only by Trump, but by people anti-Trump. I remember when Trump was pushing for Operation Warp Speed to get the vaccines as fast as possible, people like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden were on debate stages saying that they were skeptical of it, right? Because it was Trump. It's like the left is willing to be anti-science and to somehow dunk on Trump. And do you see that ever end? When does that ever end?
Well, let's remember that the left. So what is the left? The left is that anointed left that you hear Rachel Maddow supposedly on MSNBC. The radical left doesn't have a voice on the supposedly liberal media outlets. It doesn't have a voice. When I worked for the New York Times, Noam Chomsky's name was unofficially, there was nothing written, never appeared in the newspaper. Now, Noam Chomsky is, I would argue, America's greatest intellectual, although there are issues that I disagree with Noam on, including third parties, but I admire him. My whole understanding of the liberal class and manufacturing consent, his fantastic book on Israel, The Fateful Triangle. I mean, he's a giant. And so, where's Noam? Where's Ralph? Where are all the people who were right about the war in Afghanistan? Danny Shore.
This right here.
Graduated from West Point, did combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, had the courage to call it out. Matthew Ho, where are they? They may be on, alternative media, your show, The Gray Zone, something else. But these are the voices, and I know because I was the Middle East bureau chief of the New York Times, spoke out against the invasion of Iraq, and I'm watching all these yahoos, cited as experts on the Middle East. I speak Arabic, I spent 7 years there. I don't think they've, maybe they did a junket to, a beach resort off of Tel Aviv paid for by the Israeli government, but they don't know anything about the Middle East. But they were parroting back the dominant narrative. The journalists parroted back, George Packer, all these kind of people, because it was good for their career. They didn't know anything about the Middle East. I mean, they were attacking me by name. And so, in fact, we have to also concede that the real left with a spine, with a backbone, with a real critique, has been banished from the mainstream media landscape.
I think what he said just there about where are the people who were right, where are the people who were correct about the Afghanistan war, right? Like, it's one thing that when you're going into the war and when you're going into this kind of conflict to kind of sideline those sort of anti-war voices, but now the history and the truth has been borne out that the Afghanistan war was a catastrophe. It failed in every reasonable way except one, which was that it was a major success for the weapons industry. It's a complete failure in regards to empire building. It's a complete failure in regards to building international community. It's a complete failure even in regards to helping the American people themselves. Where are the people who were saying that all along? Where are the people who said from the beginning that this was a mistake? If we were living in an actual society and not just a business with a good HR department, if we were living in a real society, well, the first thing they would do is bring out the people who are right to talk about the issue and say, okay, you were right. Why? Let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. But that's not happening. Billionaires are monarchs. Yeah, I mean, they've got the power. They might as well be. What is especially dangerous is the cults of personality that grow around these anti-establishment tech oligarchs. Yeah. If Bill Gates bought $1 billion in Bitcoin, announced Microsoft would accept Bitcoin, liquidates his position, and then reneged, he would be in jail. Yeah, but because Elon Musk has so many deep, dirt-poor, uneducated capitalist stands with Stockholm Syndrome, licking his boots and thinking he's a rebel, he gets away with it. Well, there's, worst case scenario these guys will ever face is a fine. That's it. That's it. And if something can be paid with a fine, then it's not really a crime, right, for the rich. Hey, Mark, how you doing, bud? Good to see you. The left were the ones who made pills to help with lung cancer and were the first to get to space. The left are all about science. That's my favorite thing to say. People say to me, communism has always failed. And I'm just like, what are you talking about? The communists were the first into space. What are you actually talking about? And then they just move on to something else. Because they can't actually contemplate. They can't actually compute that, right? The communists were the first into space. What are you even talking about? The communists defeated the Nazis, right? What are you even talking about? While I think the media definitely heavily sways opinions with how it manufactures consent, I think that internet communications and discussions here continues to erode the power of traditional media. Yes, I think that that's true, but I also think that we're starting to see methods of control infect. YouTube, for example, has definitely deprioritization is what it's called, right? Jimmy Dore has talked about this, so have many leftists, and including Chris Hedges, has said that the algorithms have 100% deprioritized leftists. The leftists, my channel has been deprioritized, for sure it has. I get people telling me all the time that they stumbled on me because they typed in capitalist death cult, and because of a specific thing that they were searching, that many of my videos are have the phrase capitalist death cult in them, and so that's how they found me. But they've told me, they've been no, I look up socialism or communism or any of that kind of stuff, I don't see you, you're not around. And literally every single one of my videos has the hashtag socialism, has the hashtag communism. So I've been deprioritized for sure. That's for sure. Which makes it even more important to spread me around, guys. Like, you gotta share, you gotta subscribe, you gotta throw $1 my way, all that kind of stuff, right? It's all in the description. Yep, you ended up from a communist. Was it BreadTube? Likely BreadTube, because I spread my stuff throughout Reddit the best I can. I don't get to spread throughout most of Reddit. Most of Reddit won't let me put my videos up, but I do have my little places here and there. And but for sure, like, I've been completely deprioritized from YouTube. It's really, really clear, and that's the way they're gonna do it, right? And then eventually, like, voices like mine will just kind of fade out, right? That they'll never actually ban me. Oh, Jen Zedong, yeah, Jen Zedong's been very, very kind to me. Very kind to me, Jen Zedong has been. That's a really great one too. But, like, eventually leftist voices will never be banned in, like, a true McCarthyian kind of way. We'll just be deprioritized so as to be irrelevant, right? We'll just fade out. And any success that we see will be in spite of that, right? Alan, I wouldn't call Stalin communist. I have a strong opinion on Stalin, and that opinion is that if somebody made, like, an HBO series about the life of Stalin, but called him, like, Ivan, right? Or called him by his actual name. Stalin wasn't his actual name. I forgot his actual name offhand, but if they just called him by his actual name and set his story on, like, Mars, right? I think that it would be one of the most popular television shows of all time. I think that it would be on the same scale as, like, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, like that kind of thing. That people, and I have this great idea. Wouldn't it be great to tell the story of Stalin, right? Have him coming up and, like, fighting against the Tsars. He has a very Robin Hood story. Like, his story is very much about, like, train robberies and, like, robbing the rich to give to the poor and, like, creating a revolutionary movement and all of this. And that was his, the way he did it was by robbing the Tsars, right? And I love the idea that you would have this, like, story about this, like, Robin Hood style kind of Western gunslinger figure in Stalin. But none of the Americans would put together that this is the story of communism is what we're watching. And then only after the October Revolution, when they throw off the Tsars and all this kind of stuff. So you're talking about probably 2 seasons in. Like, you're, like, 2 seasons deep into this story. And then they, like, come out and they all celebrate their victory. And viewers will be like, yeah, they won, all that. And then you show the hammer and the sickle. And then you show this is the communist thing, and just watch these people lose their fucking minds about it. That for the last 2 years we've been watching Stalin. Oh! And Stalin is absolutely a communist. Like, Stalin is absolutely a communist. The story of Stalin is one of a man who is fighting against literal monarchs. A literal feudal society that absolutely was oppressing its own citizens, was absolutely backwards. No, that's just something I'd love to see. Like, that's what I would love to see. Somebody should make it, is what I'm saying. It would be very, very popular. Joseph Stalin's story is fascinating, dude. Just read his Wikipedia page. Like, no bullshit. Just read his... Ignore it when they're like, and then the brutal guy did a brutal thing. And it's, like, always kind of nonsense. But if you just start at the beginning and read through it, it's riveting. His life story is riveting. It is a fascinating story of a young man who realizes at an early age that the feudal system that he lives under is total fucking bullshit, becomes a rebel, right? Like a Star Wars level rebel fighter, a revolutionary from a very young age, is like a train robber and a coach robber, right? Like, you take a look at the early, like, Stalin. You can just look at Joseph Stalin's pictures when he was young. No, Stalin young. Why am I putting that E there? Look at this guy. Look at this dreamboat, eh? Tell me that's not a dreamboat. Look at him. He's gorgeous. But there are great pictures of him as a... come on. Stalin... what's that called? When you... mugshot. That's what it's called. So here's Stalin's mugshot, right? These are the mugshots that were taken of Stalin after he was arrested, right? By the Tsars, after he tried to do yet another coach robbery, and it didn't go well. He gets banished to like a prison colony, which he escapes twice. The first time he escaped it, he had to go back because it was too cold and he couldn't make it. And then the second time he escapes and just goes back to the Bolsheviks, right? One of my favorite moments is that you have the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks, right? The Mensheviks are allies to the Bolsheviks, and they're just in different areas, right? And they're communicating with one another. And the Mensheviks force a resolution to get passed that says we'll no longer fund the movement through robbery, right? And Stalin and Lenin go along with it, but then privately agree, we're going to keep doing that. And so they do. Stalin and Lenin were ballers, man. They were ballers. Just read Stalin's Wikipedia entry. He's a fucking baller, and he's and the fact that it worked, the fact that they actually did manage to successfully create a revolution, and then Stalin basically goes around and fucking owns the shit out of the Tsarists, essentially capitalists. The kulaks and all this kind of shit. The things that today's neo-Nazis are like, oh, I can't believe Stalin did that. I'm like, yeah, Stalin's gonna go around and fuck those guys up, dude. And took the society from literally an agricultural feudal society, right, into an industrial powerhouse that defeats the Nazis, right? That defeats the Nazis and is the first people into space. I just don't even know what to tell you. Like, I just don't even, like, how can, I don't know how to convince people that Joseph Stalin was a total fucking baller. Like, he absolutely was. Was he perfect? Like, was he a perfect, like, was he Jesus Christ manifest? Obviously not. He was a man, but he was a good man who tried his best and was largely successful, I would say. Like, Lenin and Stalin were ballers. Like, they were fucking ballers. If Joseph Stalin was in charge of the United States today and was running the United States the way that he ran the Soviet Union, we would all be like, oh man, he's the best leader we've had in our lifetimes. For sure we would be saying this. Like, he's better than Trump, better than Obama, better than Bush, better than the other Bush, better than Clinton, right? Like, these guys basically betrayed and sold out their own nation, right? While what was Stalin doing? Protecting his own people and building his own nation up. Like, I don't know what to say anymore to convince people that this guy was sweet. My thing about Trotsky and Stalin is that I wish they had buried the hatchet. I wish that they had found a way that relationship is the indicative relationship of the left eating itself, right? I wish that Trotsky and Stalin were able to look at one another and understand that their disagreements with one another were largely personal, that they really didn't like each other as people, that they never liked one another as people, like right from the inception. And I think that if they had buried the hatchet and just said, like, we may disagree on some things, but we shouldn't let that come between us as working together as comrades, that it would have made the Soviet Union stronger. That it would have made, and maybe created, because my largest critiques about Stalin is that he didn't really know how to keep this ball rolling. That a lot of what was keeping the Soviet Union working as a communist project was Stalin's desire that it would be so. And when Stalin finally died, he didn't really leave behind mechanisms by which to keep that system intact. China is facing a similar problem right now, right? They've just gone through a pretty large anti-corruption movement, and they're still going through this anti-corruption movement. But now there's like big questions about like, okay, like, can we keep this going while once Xi Jinping retires or dies? Can we keep it? Can we keep going along those lines? And so, it's a legitimate concern, because what happens after Stalin is that the capitalists get in, right? And they start working with members of the cabinet, and eventually foment a legislative coup. And that's what makes the Soviet Union collapse ultimately. We substituted their regular neoliberal content with pure communism. Let's watch. Well, and like for real, I think that people would love it. Like read the Wikipedia article, man. Like it's his story is it's amazing. It's amazing. It's staggering that it worked. Staggering that it happened. Like, you'd never think that somebody like this would become like the leader of the fucking Soviet Union. Like, it just doesn't happen. That'd be funny. He started as yes, but later during World War II, it all turned bad? No, I don't think so, bud. Like, World War II was a catastrophe, right? It was a catastrophe. That Stalin did everything he could to try to avoid that war, right? People come at him and they say like, oh, they signed a non-aggression pact with the Nazis. Everybody signed a non-aggression pact with the Nazis. The Soviets were the last ones to do it. And why? Because they don't want a fucking war, right? Why would they want a war with the Nazis? Like, I can't imagine why anyone would have wanted that war, including Hitler, by the way. Like, I think it was just arrogance. And World War II, like, I think that's when Stalin and the Soviets and the communists come out and show how the strength of the communist movement and the strength of communism, that even when they are under an existential threat as devastating as the Nazi invasion, they're still able to organize effectively, produce weapons, arms, and tanks on a scale they'd never done before, right? Restructure their entire society in a short period of time, and defeat industrial capitalism, which is what the Nazis were, right? That the communists are the ones that defeated the industrial capitalists in World War II. And then, of course they have to recover after that, and that's a whole other story. But like, I think that communism really shows its strength throughout World War II. I do admire Stalin as a street fighter. I also learned street fighting, but just because I am gay or queer. Do you mean Street Fighter as in like the video game Street Fighter? Or do you mean just like he was an amazing revolutionary, man. Nationalize all industry, terms normal, totally normal in global wartime. Yeah. Boys were men at 11. My father was a spy for Russia against the Germans. Whoa, wait a minute, Ruth. Hold on a second here. I feel like you're just casually dropping some absolutely brilliant shit here, Ruth. My father was a spy for Russia against the Germans because soldiers didn't pay attention to children. Most knew many languages and heard everything soldiers' generals were planning. Ruth, that is some baller information that you're dropping right there. I mean, Stalin is taught positively in Russia to this day. They aren't even communists anymore. No, the current regime is like Putin is. It's tough to kind of peg Putin because Russia is a more capitalist model, certainly, but Putin maintains his power because of his, because he's still willing to support the citizenry, right? That like the Western neoliberal capitalists have abandoned most of the populace. Putin doesn't really do that. And so I guess he's like a soft neoliberal. While some in the West compared Stalin, the Stalin-Hitler comparison is absurd. Like, it is absurd. Like, for real. Like, for fuck's sake, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf when he was young. He was walking around with a book that said we should exterminate the Jews when he was, like, in his 20s. And he took that book and, like, went up and became the leader, and then he exterminated the Jews, right? Stalin didn't do shit like that. That's not how fucking Stalin worked. And, like, most of the time when you start to talk to people and they are, like, anti-Stalin, you find out pretty quickly that they're actually pro-Nazi, right? Oh, Stalin murdered a whole bunch of people. Like, yeah, Nazis. You have a problem with that? Right? Like, yeah, Stalin killed a lot of Nazis. Yeah, Stalin rounded up political prisoners, all right. A lot of Nazis. What's the problem here? All the problems of the adoption of communism was that it happened in agricultural-based economies rather than industrial Germany, where it should have happened instead of Hitler. Yeah, and well, it was the industrialists themselves that wanted to prevent that, right? That the industrialists funded Hitler, and that's really what kept Hitler going. That if the industrialists had have ignored Hitler, had have not funded him, he would have gone nowhere, right? But it was the industrial capitalists that funded Hitler's campaign, and ultimately were in favor of Hitler ascending to power, because one of the first promises that Hitler made was to eliminate the communists and the socialists from the society, who were the largest threat to industrial capitalist power. And he did. The first concentration camp wasn't a Jewish concentration camp. It was a communist concentration camp. A communist and socialist concentration camp, where they rounded up political prisoners, communists and socialists, and put them in a concentration camp. And then it was the Jews, right? My favorite is when people pretend like the gulags were the same as the Jewish concentration camps. I'm like, no, bro. Like, no, not even close. Yeah, a real Soviet state would have been the thing. Stalin's original name, yeah. I sub. See, this is what I'm saying. So just call him this the whole time. Just call him like Isub, right? Or Osib. I'm probably pronouncing this badly, but like just call him that the whole time, and like astute observers will connect to it, but that's not most Americans. And then like before you know it, you're in the second season. The revolution is happening. The communist symbol. They pull back and there's the like hammer and sickle communist symbol, right? You got Stalin and Lenin standing underneath. Yosef, yes. So it's like Joseph. It's like Joseph. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, of course, because Joseph Stalin. What am I thinking? Of course. Right? And just like watch Americans have their minds completely fucking blown. Just the Fox News pundits losing their shit about it alone would be perfect. Because, like, most of the movies and television that we watch would cast Stalin as a hero, right? Like, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, Robin Hood, right? Rob from the rich to give to the poor, fight against an evil empire, right? Like, most of our movies and most of our televisions have Joseph Stalin as the protagonist. And yet, when it comes to actually talking about Joseph Stalin, oh, he's an evil bear, and he's violence, and all. Yeah, Luke Skywalker did violence too, dude. What, you think Han didn't shoot first? Right? Like, what are you thinking? They can even nickname the character the Man of Steel. Look at that. Thinking ahead, Duke. I like it. Stalin was busy with Japan and the Far East. Yeah, he didn't want to split his military. He didn't want that war, dude. Like, no, he didn't want that war. Nobody wanted that war. No, I am, like, and most people are, actually, still genuinely confused as to why that war happened. Like, what the fuck was Hitler doing? Didn't Hitler have other things to deal with? Like, Hitler had a lot of shit to deal with, dude. Like, what was he doing with this invasion into Russia? What was the point? right? Like, that was my big thing. And like, it really does fall back on, like, warmongers and people who are caught into this space of war are not rational, right? If you have capitulated the idea that we need to go to war, in a war of aggression, no less, you think it was just straight up a resource thing. You straight up think he was just like, oil is there, let's get that oil. And we do know there's this great conversation that Hitler has. I wonder if I could find it. I found it years back. YouTube.com. Hitler in conversation. I wonder if I could find it again. Hitler talks about losing war. Is this it here? No. There's this great recording that I found years back that has Hitler talking about why he feels he lost the war against the Russians. And his statement was that he didn't expect the Russians to have the productive capacity that they had. That he thought that he was going to be able to roll his tanks through, and that the Russians would maybe put up a front initially, but then he would break through, and his productive capacity would be able to destroy the communist productive capacity. But nope, that's not what happened. They had to invent synthetic oil. That's crazy, dude. That's so crazy. My father's town was Russian, Austrian, German, and Polish before he was old enough to leave. Yeah, man. What a crazy time, eh? And yeah, Putin is a crime lord, for sure. He's former KGB, right? With rising fascism today, communism is the only system with factual precedent that can destroy it. Hence why we are here right now. Getting ready. Oh, Bubble Guppy. Bringing it right down to the earth, eh? Making it real. That's real talk, dude. Like, that's real talk. Like, I sincerely hope that Canada doesn't need to actually go through a fascist period to understand that fascism is bad. Like, I really, really hope that we don't actually have to do it. I really hope we don't actually have to put the fork in the socket, right? Like, just no, fascism's bad. Hey, look, this guy's talking fascism. Maybe don't do it. Nah. He had to fuel all those tanks and planes somehow, yeah? The Rockefellers entered the chat. Oh, God. Yeah, the Rockefellers. No, the Rockefellers, that kind of wealth, like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and all that, they're just gonna dissolve into the background, right? They're smart enough to realize that the true way to maintain hereditary power is to ensure that nobody knows you exist, right? That if you are in the background, nobody knows anything about you, nobody knows word one, then you can do what you want. And that's what the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and the Morgans, right? They've known that for generations. Same with here in Canada. The wealthiest Canadian, his name is David Thompson. Nobody knows who he is. He's a or maybe fourth generation monarch. His official title is the third Baron of Fleet, right? No one knows who he is. He might as well be invisible in the Canadian discourse. Owns the Globe and Mail. And that's the way that I think a billionaire, if I was a billionaire, that's what I would be doing. I would do everything I could to ensure. I wouldn't be trying to do what Elon Musk is doing and convince everybody I'm smart. I wouldn't try to do what Warren Buffett is doing and try and convince everybody I'm a savvy businessman. I wouldn't be doing what Gates is doing and try and convince people that I'm so charitable and all this. Wouldn't be doing any of that. I would be doing everything I could to just keep me out of the discourse, never pay attention to me, don't do interviews, just in the background. Because if you don't know who the guy is, then you can't pick up pitchforks and go to his house. Beyond the River Volga, near Stalingrad, there was one of the biggest oil fields. Previously, Stalin and Churchill had agreed to invade Iraq and Iran and deposed fascist dictators, which they would plan to occupy until the end of the war. The Western allies, such as the United States, also sent Lend-Lease throughout Iraq and Iran, making it useful to capture. Although people tend to forget that most of the Lend-Lease came after 1944, after the tide of the war had already switched. Yeah. Holding wealth in paintings and estates held for 200 years and gold and jewelry in safety deposit boxes and safes also don't make it into Ford's calculation. Yep. All that shit, man. All that shit. It's like... And once the society continues to degrade and collapse, right, that the wealth of the society will go into the hands of these guys, right? Like, that if I'm a Rothschild or a Rockefeller, I'm super happy that Elon Musk and Bezos and all these guys are doing everything they can to be in center stage. I'm over the moon. Like, let them. Right? Let these guys, and let the world be convinced that they're the wealthiest, right? Who cares, right? The Rockefellers, the Morgans, and the Rothschilds own the Federal Reserve, right? Who's wealthier? Who's wealthier? The person who has the most money, or the person who owns the money supply? Who's wealthier, do you think? I don't think that the Rothschilds and all these guys, I don't think they give a shit if you think that they're billionaires or anything. In fact, if it was up to me, I wouldn't want to be known at all, right? It's like that statement, right? The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. Oh, I love talking about Stalin and Hitler and all this shit, and I just learned something really nice here. Mock, you always come out with the best shit, dude. Like, your facts and trivia are always the best, man. And I'm always glad that someone like you is here because you keep me honest. Like, I never, ever... One of the things I really pride myself on is that even though I take, like, a pro-communist stance, like, I want to be entrenched in what is real, right? In what is honest. I don't ever want to just, like... Because, like, again, like... Was Stalin, like, a perfect man? No. Like, obviously. But, like, was he this demon that people try to peg him with? I'd be very curious. Wouldn't it be really interesting to actually meet Adolf Hitler? Like, Adolf Hitler had some very crazed views, but I think one of the things that would unsettle a lot of people, because I've, like, listened to interviews with this guy, I've listened to him talk. I think the thing that would really make people uncomfortable about somebody like Hitler is that he kind of sounds like a normal dude, right? You can talk to him, shoot the shit with him, right? You meet him down in the pub, right? People said that, like, through his youth that he was kind of like a quiet, sort of reserved sort of a fellow. But, like, you listen to him talk, and he just sounds kind of normal, right? Doesn't sound like this crazed lunatic that people expect because that's how his speeches were, right? I think that's the thing that I think people would be really unsettled with when it comes to Hitler. The De Moraes family. The De Moraes family. The De Moraes. Yeah, that's the one. What do we got? Was a Canadian financier and philanthropist with an estimated family worth of $4.5 billion. Oh yeah, he's got to be in the top 20, right? He's not like... Oh, he's the fourth wealthiest person in Canada. He must have gone up. I usually got my finger on the pulse of this, but Canada's wealthiest families. There's a great... Here you go. This is as of 2020. Come on now. What? No, I like that list. There we go. Here we go. Yeah, so you got David Thompson and family, right? His wealth in 2020 was 39, so 40 billion. Wealth now, April 7th, 54 billion, right? And, like, the David Thompson family can't ever be poor. They're too entrenched in everything. That their strategy, and the true strategy of building wealth, right? Once you attain a certain level of wealth, you want to buy about 10 to 20% of everything, right? That if you can buy about 10 to 20% of everything, and have shares in about 10 to 20% in everything, then you can never really lose money, right? Because even if a thing collapses, doesn't matter. You've got all this money over here, right? So you're so well diversified, right, that you can't help but make money. Joseph Tsai is an interesting figure because he's actually a Chinese Canadian that immigrated to Canada, and he has really elevated it. Like over 10 years, he's just gone. And near as I can tell, it's all real estate. It's all real estate. Galen Weston, of course, jamming himself in between us and our need for food, right? That's Galen Weston's strategy. Don't know anything about David Sheraton. These are new names to me. Schenberg. There's the Irvings, right? Oh wow, I'm a bit out of the loop actually. I don't know any of these names. But it's all the same story, right? It's all make everybody else do your work for you. Chip Wilson. There you go, Chip. Right. Yeah, Bill Gates is the largest owner of American farmland. Yeah, because after these are just numbers, right? These are just numbers. That after the system collapses, and they know it's collapsing because they're the ones collapsing it, Victini, I respect the energy that you're putting into the chat, but I would not like my chat to be banned, okay? So I am just gonna remove that one. Like, we should arrest the Westons and legislate them into prison. That YouTube is walking around finding reasons to ban me. I don't need to give them reasons. And after the system collapses, right? What's left? Land, water, minerals, right? That's what's left. That we're not, and these guys are going to rule as little petty kings and queens, right? And we're going to have to sell ourselves to them. And the system is neo-feudal, right? Being a communist means you must be knowledgeable of material reality. The most insane ideologies are based on social construction and not material reality. Like the very postmodern Trumpism. Yeah. Well, and the merger of Trump and evangelical Christianity, right? Like the merger of sort of the cult of Trumpism and the cult of the personality of Trump merging with the evangelical Christian movement is basically perfect, right? Because evangelical Christianity is completely disconnected from reality. It has no like genuine critique of the material conditions of Earth, except to say that things will be so much better when we're dead. And then it's the evangelical Christians that turn around and call everybody else nihilists, right? Like Stephen Harper called Marxists and Leninists nihilists. And it's like, no, right? No. The nihilists are the ones that are saying we don't need to improve the conditions of Earth because things will be better when we die, right? Those are the nihilists. Galen Weston said she supported a progressive minimum wage, which probably means generous yearly 15 cents raises to employees. Yeah, and then took away our $2 COVID raise after a few months. Exactly. A COVID raise that the government paid, not his business. No worries, Victini. I understand. The energy can get you, right? The desire to... Believe me, every so often I do have to bite my tongue because I want to be saying things like, get the guillotines, right? Let's go. But that's how you get banned off platforms. I've seen that happen. That's how you get banned off platforms. So if we're going to make statements, it needs to be... we should arrest these people and put them on trial, right? That's something you can't ban somebody for saying we should arrest someone and put them on trial, right? Like, we should take anybody who has done any climate change denial funding, right? Like ExxonMobil, the Koch brothers, all these guys. Anybody that has funded any initiative in order to deny climate change, we should bring to The Hague. We should have them tried, and we should be pushing for the heaviest punishment. Which, if you're aware of what the heaviest punishment from The Hague is, it is to be hung. That's how you say that. So because what they've done is an abomination. Like, it's a complete abomination. Trudeau campaign rally canceled over security concerns amid protests. Like, this has got to be a big wake-up call for these guys, eh? I think it's best always, anyways, to merely put these people into a situation where they merely have the same basic food and shelter as anyone else. What's so funny about that, Duke, is like that's so obvious, right? Like, yeah, everyone should have food and shelter, right? Like, everyone should have food and shelter. Who disagrees with that, right? Can you disagree with that? Is it possible to disagree with that? And when you find people like, but then you find out that the system you live under isn't actually interested in that. That the system you live under withholds food and shelter, right? To coerce you into selling yourself to a billionaire death cult, essentially, that is structured to destroy your society and destroy the future for your children. Like, what are we supposed to do about this? If they are sent to a tropical island with umbrellas and pina coladas to drink as long as they don't come back. Yeah, I love it when the billionaires say, like, oh, if you raise my taxes or if you do that, then I'll just leave. And I've steadily become like, yeah, great. I'll pack your bags. Where are you going? Get out of here. Sure, go ahead, sell all your assets, right? Sell all your business, right? Take your kids out of their cushy private school where you're training them, right? Say farewell to all your business contacts. Say farewell to your friends and family and get the fuck out of here. I'll pack your bags. Like, these billionaires think they're important. That's what's so fucking annoying. Like, literally, we're standing in front of them saying, you are worthless, please get out of here. And their response is, well, I'm going to leave. And it's like, good? Like, but if they sell their assets, that's just as good. Like, just fucking get out of here. Like, I think that we should raise taxes on wealth over... I mean, if you want to be honest about what my position is, I think wealth earned over $1 million should be taxed at 100%. Anything above that, too bad for you, right? Too bad for you. And that's it. So, like, all these billionaires and all this kind of stuff have to sell their assets, but nobody can actually, like, have anything more than $1 million, right? Something bootstraps, exactly. Apparently it is possible, but not reasonable to disagree with that. Well, what's odd is that the people who are disagreeing with everybody should have food and shelter are the same people that clutch onto that Bible that tells them to give their money to the poor. Like, what? Like, it is a mental illness. Like, this is how I try to find compassion with these people, because, like, I think that they're suffering from a pretty significant mental illness, that, like, they need professional help. Like, we need to get these people to see doctors. Like, what if they sell their assets to a corporation owned by themselves? Yeah, fuck all that shit. Fuck all that noise. This idea that corporations are people, this idea that corporations are, like, their own independent thing, fuck that. Fuck that. That's garbage. I want to see that gone. Like, you tell me what I think one of the major things we should destroy is. We should destroy this idea that a corporation is its own entity. What are you fucking talking about? That's such a trash way to think about this shit. No. First of all, I think we should get rid of these corporations. Like, what are they doing? Like, if it has to be incorporated, then it should be nationalized. Right? If it has to be incorporated, then it should be nationalized. if you can't organize it without incorporating it, then it should be nationalized. These are very, very simple ways to organize your society. Like, oh no, it's so big and unwieldy, and so you need to have it incorporated, or it's how you diffuse this, and this, then it should be nationalized. And like, too bad. Like, if you need to incorporate it in order to control it, then you should nationalize it. I know, there's always loopholes, right? There's always loopholes. Like, and you know, that's why I think we need to create hard lines and eliminate the capitalist class, right? Because like, just eliminate it. Raise the corporate tax to 100%. Like, fucking get rid of these corporations. Like, I'm so over this idea that we should be negotiating with these guys. Like, no, we're done with that. Like, the negotiation is over. These people have revealed themselves to be mask-off fascists and psychopaths, right? Like, they're not negotiating with us, right? They're just manipulating us and gaslighting us. Like, and all we gotta do is stand up like a bunch of little ants and say to these crickets, get the fuck out of here. And they'll go. Nationalize them all, then hand them over to the workers in the form of a co-op. That's one way to do it. Kropotkin intensifies. Worker co-op's definitely the next step. Well, I mean, we seem to think that democracy is good enough for our leadership but not good enough for our workplaces, right? Like, why shouldn't the people who are doing the work be the primary deciders of what goes on? And like, I do think that there are certain things that should stay within the power of the state. Like, I think water, like a water utility, right? No, that should just stay within control of the state, right? That the state should be the one that has sort of the mandate on that. I don't like the idea of any group of people, right? Least of all a capitalist, obviously, but any group of people having control over a vital resource like that. Because, like, any group of people is going to lean on the idea that, oh, we could just raise the price of this, right? Nah. Like, big time nah. Like, if you want to go and make, like, I don't know, Xboxes or, like, shoes, right? Nike shoes or whatever, go ahead, right? Go ahead. Oh, yeah, Alan, are you one of these? No state? I don't think that that is possible. I don't think it's possible to have no state. I think that if you distill it down, and this is something, like, I'm not a hard line on this, like, I'm not going to break a relationship up with anybody over this, but, like, there will always be a state apparatus. It will always exist. And even if you have some kind of organizational force for elections or anything like that, then that's your state, right? You'll always have some kind of state apparatus. That the idea that the early communists had of and then the state will wither away, I just don't think that that's a real thing that happens. You know what I mean? Like, I think that there always will be some mechanism or some apparatus that is required for central organization. Higher level of government, but not a state. I mean, what's the difference? Like, what is the difference? Exactly. Why would a sensible representative government negotiate with an unelected occupying power structure? Yeah. Like, the only reason they are is because they're bribed, right? And this is the big problem. No, state is a nation state, but government is different than a state. Like, you're talking about, like, true open borders, right? True internationalism. That we all live as one people on God's green earth, that kind of thing. Which, I mean, yeah, like, I get behind that idea. I don't, I'm not a big, like, having immigration laws to me is kind of odd, right? Like, it's sort of odd that we just don't let people pass through the borders pretty clearly, like, pretty cleanly. Like, what's with all this red tape? What's with all this control? What's with all this? The Soviets attempted a no-state society, but 18 countries invaded them while they were at civil war. Yeah. Like, if such a thing were to happen, I think that's something. Yeah, I'm kind of with Mocked on this. That's something that you can materialize down the road. You know what I mean? That like that. I think that is one of those like idealisms that communism presented in the early days. So like one of the idealisms of communism was no religion, right? That religion is gone from the society. But as the communist project continued forward, it became pretty obvious that if you wanted to like hardline create a no religion society, well, you're looking at creating more problems than you solve, right? Like you're talking about purges, you're talking about like cleansing, like ugh. And that's why most capitalists, most communists don't really hammer on that line too hard any longer, because I think it's better to have a diversification of culture and a diversification. Yeah, and it is something to aim for, but because we're so detached from it, like it's so far down the line, it's one of those things that like I just don't like. I'm actually a lot more practical when it comes to talking about this kind of stuff. That like it's all well and good to talk about what would be nice to see, but I want to see some brass tacks. I want to see some like, okay, how does this actually work? Like that's what always frustrated me when I talk about the basic income, right? People would always be like, "Oh, you're so utopian," and I'm like, literally like, well, you can create a basic income for fossil fuel industry, but you can't create a basic income for normal citizens. What the fuck are you talking about? It always bothered me. Well, and like a government is an internal mechanism for people to kind of negotiate and figure out how to organize themselves. Whereas a nation state is a more international thing. That a nation, like the borders around a nation is like the border that exists for that government, right? And that all of the governments around it also agree that we have that kind of control. And until everybody around agrees, like, oh, we don't really need this anymore, then it can come to a place where it can kind of dissolve. But we're definitely not there. All right, guys. While this conversation is interesting, this is getting into the more technical aspects of the communist movement, which is all well and good. Please come to my protest, September 18th, 2 p.m., Yonge and Dundas Square. Always remember, guys, you are divine beings walking around in divine energy. These capitalists spend billions and billions of dollars to gaslight you and to pretend as though you are less than what you are. Don't let them. All right, guys. Good luck. We're going to need it.